Chapter 2194. She felt that she probably wouldn't be able to forget this woman for the rest of her life. Her red clothes were alluring, and her face was exquisite and magnificent. She was like a blooming flower of flames, so dazzling that she almost couldn't turn her eyes away. She seemed to hear the woman's gentle voice. "Are you willing to follow me to the holy water sect?" She nodded. At the same time, Yi Lingmin, who was gradually losing consciousness, also nodded. At some point in time, Yang Shirong was silently standing next to Arbor. She dazedly looked at Yi Lingmin, who was slowly walking away with a smile. Yi Lingmin seemed to have fallen asleep with a smile on her lips. No one knew that she seemed to be immersed in a dream right now. In this dream, she wantonly let herself wander further and further away. She still remembered that it was truly a cold winter that year. Master bought her a set of cotton-padded jacket and trousers from a ready-made clothing store and wrapped her up like a Fulu doll. At that time, she saw her walking with a blue and white umbrella in front of her. She abruptly turned around and waved at her with a smile. "Come here quickly." Yi Lingmin felt that Murong Sun was incomparably beautiful at that time. There was probably no one in this world who could compare to her. She only wanted to work hard to become the best disciple in Master's heart. She only was unwilling to lose to little junior sister. She only wanted Master to look at her more. She wanted Master to feel proud every time she mentioned Yi Lingmin. Unfortunately, it was an extravagant hope in the end. Yi Lingmin quietly left with a faint smile. Arbor reached out to touch her breathing. He bit his lips and angrily said, "Yi Ling, who told you to die?" Yang Shirong couldn't help but sigh. Let her die. This child didn't have the slightest will to live anymore. The reason why she flew out to protect Jojo today was most likely because she was prepared to die. If that's the case, then just let her be. Arbor lowered his head and reflexively tightly grasped Yi Lingmin's hand. "Senior. Sister Yi." Yang Shirong patted Arbor's head. "Jojo, don't be sad. This is Yi Lingmin's own choice. In the end, it all started because of her." Yang Shirong sighed. "Let her be the one to end it." Arbor lowered his head and said nothing. Yang Shirong couldn't help but sigh. "Jojo, the dead are gone. What we need to do now is to look to the future." Arbor nodded. She understood the logic, but understanding was one thing. Seeing Yi Lingmin die with her own eyes was another. She really hated this senior sister in her heart. But watching her die with his own eyes, he felt very sad. It wasn't easy for the Holy Water Sect to reach this point. Arbor said in a low voice, "I hope that from now on, we won't have any more disciples making unnecessary sacrifices." She hoped that from now on, everyone in the Holy Water Sect would be neat and tidy, and not a single person would be missing. Yang Shirong patted her head in relief. "If it's our Jojo, I believe you can do it." After Second Ant Master said this, she glared fiercely at Prince Mo, who was trying to walk up and interrupt their conversation. Mo Lien glanced at Second Ant Master aggrievedly. When she saw Arbor looking over, she hurriedly flew over and hugged her, shouting, "Jojo, Second Ant Master glared at me again just now. Do you have any fucking shame?" Second Ant Master rolled her eyes grumpily at the sky. Xiao Mu was tormented by the two people's jesting, but half of the sorrow in her heart was washed away. Chapter 2195. "Jojo," Mo Lien said angrily, "Second Uncle Master doesn't like me." Arbor looked at her husband sympathetically. "Husband, there's a reason why Second Uncle Master doesn't like you." "What's the reason?" Mo Lien asked curiously. "You're beautiful." Arbor raised her small hand and stroked his chin, then floated away. Mo Lien! Exclamation point. Was he being teased by his wife? Yang Shirong, Arbor came to Yi Lingmin's side and put her bones into the peach blossom slope, then asked Little Tree to bury Yi Lingmin beside her senior sisters. Yi Lingmin's matter was considered to be over. Just as Second Uncle Master said, it was impossible to save a person who had lost the will to live no matter how much you wanted to. Reporting to the Crown Princess, we found the Shuntian Prefecture's prefecture lord in the dungeon. Bring them up. Xiao Mu reflexively looked behind Tong's group. Reporting to the Crown Prince. The Shuntian Prefecture's people are basically under control. 1/3 of them have already mutated into zombie puppets. We're still not sure if the other 2/3 have mutated or not. When Mo Lien heard this, he nodded and said, then deal with the mutated zombie puppets? As for the remaining people, isolate them for the time being. If symptoms appear, kill them. The subordinate nodded in agreement and left to carry out the order. Arbor looked up at Prince Mo and reached out a small paw. Mo Lien looked at her in amusement and naturally reached out to grab her hand, pulling her to his side. What's wrong? When are we going to the Divine Lands? She really wanted to try her ship that could cross the 3 states and 6 prefectures. She wondered if the old man was bragging so well. Was it completely effortless to cross the Divine Lands? This was something that would only be known after trying. Eliminate the remaining military forces of the Shuntian prefecture. Let Dunza take charge here. In this way, there was no need to worry that Shuntian prefecture would stab Jojo in the back again. Xiao Mu nodded when she heard this. Turning his head, he saw Dun Zong being carried out. This was really flattering. Mo Lien's 2 subordinates found a rattan chair and carried Dun Zong, whose body was tilted, over. Beside Dun Zhu was a skinny, dark-skinned boy. His eyes were full of spirit and he was very clever. Arbor looked at his miserable appearance and couldn't help but cough softly and ask him, "How are you, Dun Zhong?" It would have been better if he didn't ask, but once he did, Dun Zhen almost jumped up from the rattan chair. Unfortunately, he didn't have the strength to do so, so he hadn't even lifted a finger yet. This person was covered in cuts and bruises from head to toe. He looked extremely miserable. Standing beside him was a skinny, dark-skinned man. Arbor glanced at him, and the boy immediately bowed respectfully to her. "Respected miss, my name is Meng Mai. Thank you for saving me previously." Arbor nodded at him and glanced at the listless Dun Zhen. "You saved him?" Meng Mai nodded his little head. "I am now the prefecture lord's personal bodyguard. Since the prefecture lord doesn't despise me for being young, Meng Mai will naturally do my best for the prefecture lord." Arbor glanced at Dun Zhen with disdain. She didn't know what flowery words this guy used to trick this child into working for him. When Dun Zhen saw Arbor's gaze, he immediately became unhappy. "Little master, why are you looking down on me?" Chapter 2196. Why would I need a reason to despise you? Arbor gave him a look that said, "Figure it out yourself." Then he walked to Dun Zhu and squatted down. Reaching out to check his pulse, Arbor stared at Dun Zhu for a while. Dun Zhu immediately started to look nervous. "What's wrong with my body? Is there a problem? How could this be? Can't you tell what's wrong with me?" This guy was scaring himself for no reason. Before Arbor could say anything, he was already yelling, "Little master, don't scare me. I finally have a body. I don't want my body to be taken away in less than 3 days." Arbor turned to look at him, threw his hand away, and said expressionlessly, "The coating on your tongue is a little yellow. Have you been heaty lately? You also have stomach pains from time to time." "But yes. Tun Tun immediately put on a fawning look and praised, "Little master, your medical skills are really unparalleled." Arbor couldn't be bothered with this bootlicker and said, "You have to eat at least 2 meals a day. I'll prescribe you some medicine for gastrointestinal problems later. Remember to take it on time." Dun Zhu nodded. After Arbor threw down the prescription and left with Mo Lien. Only then did Dun Zong exclaim. God, he was fooled by Jojo. Since the topic had changed, he had forgotten to pour out his grievances and strongly request for a change of body. He was such a pig. He knew that the couple was a scam. In the end, they led him into the trap with just a few words. He completely forgot about the important matter he wanted to ask. Dun Zhu was so angry that he pounded the armrest of the chair back and forth. He couldn't help but yell in the direction the couple left, "Little master, come back here. This little guy is really troublesome." Mo Lien looked down at Arbor and reached out to touch his head. "Jojo, what did you say just now?" "It's just a trick," Arbor said expressionlessly. "Eating it won't hurt anyway. There is nothing wrong with his body. The main thing is that his external injuries are more serious. When the time comes, I will teach Meng Mai and let him help Dun Shu apply the wound." Mo Lien held back her laughter and nodded. Dun Tun was right. The little guy was really cunning. The two of them found a place where the sun was shining and sat down, waiting for Tong's report. After half an incense stick's worth of time, Tong came running over with his men. "Your Highness, the big and small corpse puppets have been eliminated." Mo Lien nodded. "Pack up and get ready to leave." Everyone immediately decided to leave the valley. Before leaving, Mo Lien set a small fire in the valley that Prince Mo had reinforced a hidden barrier around the valley to prevent the fire from spreading. After doing all this, the young couple held hands and was about to leave. Mo Lien instinctively leaned towards Jojo and glared at Yang Shirong. "This is my Jojo. Second Uncle Master, you're not going to break us up, are you?" "That's not right, Second Uncle Master. Jojo and I love each other more than gold. Our feelings for each other are strong." As Mo Lien spoke, she clasped Arbor's small hand tightly. After saying a few words, she lowered her head and asked Arbor, "Is it Jojo?" Arbor instinctively nodded. "No one can separate us. Is it Jojo?" Xiao Mu dazedly nodded her head again. "Second Uncle Master, your cold expression is very strange." Mo Lien huffed angrily. Chapter 2197. Jojo likes me so much. If she doesn't have me, what will she do? Am I right, Jojo? Xiao Mu might have been listening to what Mo Lien was saying at the beginning, but after he spoke so much, Xiao Mu only nodded her head as per her usual habit. She simply didn't listen to what this guy was saying. Prince Mo already knew about this habit of Jojo's. Hence, he said a series of words, and sure enough, the little guy followed suit and nodded. Yang Shirong, who was standing at the side, was so angry that she laughed at Mo Lien. It was obvious that this guy had figured out Jojo's pattern and was waiting to trick her. Second Martial Ant looked unhappy and reached out to pull Arbor to her side. "Jojo, you're so silly. If you get sold, you'll have to pay back the money." Arbor wanted to say that she was silly, but on account of Second Martial Ant's face, she didn't argue. Yang Shirong pulled Arbor and flew out of the valley. Along the way, she couldn't help but exhort, "Jojo, you're still young. Don't be in such a hurry to get married." Second Martial Ant, "I've been married for a long time." Yang Shirong was speechless. What a disappointing little guy. Second Ant Master grumpily glared at Xiao Mu. When he glanced back and saw that Mo Lien had caught up, he quickly grabbed Xiao Mu's small hand and sped up. Mo Lien was so angry that she laughed. What was Second Martial Ant trying to do? She was trying to stir up trouble. His Jojo. Mo Lien's Jojo was pulled away by Second Martial Ant Yang Shirong. From a distance, the little guy looked back at him reluctantly. Then he waved at him. "Lien, I'll leave everything here to you." Mo Lien was speechless. Why did she suddenly have a strange sense of danger? Jojo's family was not easy to get along with. They were not as honest as Qiao Zhongbang and his wife. Not easy to deal with. Mo Lien sighed and looked up at the bright sky. Swoosh. His figure immediately vanished. After returning to the inn, Yang Shirong patted her little niece's head and said with a smile, "Do you want to go into seclusion? From what I see, you should stabilize your cultivation level first." Arbor opened her small mouth and was about to speak when Prince Mo entered through the window. Without saying a word, he rushed out of the window with his little wife in his arms. Yang Shirong looked at the window in confusion. Was she hallucinating just now? Mo Lien, that bastard, was like a fucking robber. He just grabbed his wife and ran away. What kind of crown prince was this unreliable guy? It's him. Forget it. On the other side, Yang Shirong was secretly ridiculing Mo Lien's actions. On the other side, Mo Lien, who was hugging his little wife, couldn't help but sigh in relief. "Wife? What?" Arbor glared at the man in annoyance. "Second Martial Uncle is talking to me. We have to pack up and go to the Divine Land. Time is of the essence. We have to leave now." Arbor's two black eyes widened in an instant. "But husband, didn't you just say that you have to wait until Dun Zhong has completely mastered the affairs of Shuntian Prefecture and wipe out the remaining forces? Whoever wants to do that can do it. His wife is still the most important. His wife is about to run away because of Second Martial Uncle's instigation. How can he not be anxious? Take out your little boat. Let's not bother about Second Martial Uncle. Let's go." Why did this normal couple make it seem like they were eloping? Arbor felt a little incredulous. Run away without second Marshal Uncle's knowledge? Chapter 2198. Are you sure you won't be beaten to death by second Uncle Master? Why do you care so much? Mo Lien hugged his little wife and said anxiously, there's no time like the present. Let's set off today. Why you're so quick-witted. It's too hilarious. Xiao Mu gazed at her dear hubby speechlessly. Hubby. She looked at him seriously and raised her hands to pull his neck down. No matter what second Uncle Master says, we're still husband and wife. Why are you in such a hurry? When Yang Shirong came over, she happened to hear this. She was so angry that her teeth ached. Although Mo Lien that punk was pretty good in all aspects. But in Yang Shirong's eyes, this guy was just someone to make do with. If her martial niece didn't like him, no matter how many Mo Liens were stacked together, he wouldn't be good enough for her Qiao. Sensing that second Uncle Master was looking down on him, Mo Lien cautiously leaned toward Arbor and looked at second Uncle Master warily. Jojo, your second Uncle Master doesn't like me again. Arbor nodded her little head. You're beautiful. She doesn't think you're that reliable. Mo Lien, what kind of weird reason was that? Yang Shirong looked at the couple exasperatedly and asked with her hands behind her back, tell me the truth. Are you really planning to go to China? The young couple nodded in unison. I'm not asking you. Yang Shirong rebuked Prince Mo angrily. It was all because of this guy's instigation. Otherwise, her Qiao wouldn't have thought of going to China. What was so good about China? She was unfamiliar with the place and people. Moreover, her Qiao was just a little kid. Wasn't it a little unreasonable to venture into China alone? It felt like it was too early. She should at least raise her realm and become a level 10 great spiritual master. Only then would she feel assured. Arbor looked at her Uncle Master's worried gaze and said expressionlessly, second Uncle Master, don't worry. I'll take you with me. Second Uncle Master was speechless. Let's go to the Divine Land and find a good place for our sect to rebuild. Yang Shirong's eyes brightened. We'll inflict heavy losses on the Holy Water sect in the Divine Province? Why did it sound so tempting? Arbor nodded. Find a divine realm. Build it there. The corners of second Uncle's mouth twitched when he heard this. Jojo, I heard that there are only a few god realms in the entire upper 3 continents. Moreover, the good god territories have basically been taken over by some major forces. Occupied? Arbor blinked and turned to look at Mo Lien. Husband? Don't worry, just snatch it. Yang Shirong silently rolled her eyes. She snorted and glanced at the kid. You make it sound so simple. One of the divine realms is under your father's name, right? Really? Mo Lien was stunned for a moment before she nodded and said, then let him give us the realm of the gods as a wedding gift. Arbor nodded, agreeing with Prince Mo's words. Yang Shirong's mouth twitched. She looked at Prince Mo and then at their Qiao. She suddenly understood. Why were the two of them so compatible? So it was called the same black-hearted. How could the two of you be so greedy and make it sound like there was no suspense? Just like that divine realm was already in the bag for the two of them, that the great emperor of the divine land must have had 8 lifetimes of bad luck to have such a deceitful son. Yang Shirong rolled her eyes. When are we going? Chapter 2199. In a few days. Immediately. Arbor and Mo Lien gave different answers at the same time. Yang Shirong glared at Mo Lien in exasperation. What do you mean immediately? We have to prepare for China. What do we have to prepare? Aren't the things in our inner world? Second Uncle Master roared like a lion. Mo Lien looked pitifully at his Qiao. Second Uncle Master roared at me. Arbor quickly patted his hand. That's how second Uncle Master is like. You'll get used to it. Yang Shirong felt that this did not sound like a compliment. She glanced at the couple and continued, Jojo, don't be anxious. It's always good to prepare more. Who knows what you'll face when you go to China? Before Yang Shirong could finish, Mo Lien waved at her. Second Uncle Master, don't worry. I'll take care of everything. You're the one who's worrying. Yang Shirong snorted. This Mo fellow could even snatch her Qiao and run away at the inn. Who knew what he would do in the future? Sigh, the child was all grown up. It was really worrying. Yang Shirong sighed and followed the two of them with her hands behind her back. The next day, Arbor and Emolien slept until late in the morning before they got up. After the two of them finished washing up and were about to go downstairs for lunch, the shopkeeper ran upstairs and respectfully handed the two of them an invitation. Emolien reached out to take it. After turning it over and over to examine it, his lips involuntarily curled into a sneer. Who sent the invitation? Who else could it be? Emolien pulled Arbor's hand and walked downstairs. The one from the Wang family of Giant Pain. Emo Kuan? Prince Emo nodded. What did he send the invitation for? Emolien's face was full of mockery. She flipped the invitation over and over again. Then she raised a red flame and burned it to ashes. That person from the Wang family of Giant Pain said that he was rude to me last time and wanted to use the banquet as an excuse to apologize to me. Oh. Arbor didn't say anything. Emolien looked down at her in amusement. What do you think? Do I have to go? Arbor snorted. What good can there be in those foppish gatherings? Isn't it just singing and dancing and finding some scantily clad women to accompany them? Emolien's eyes lit up. She turned the little guy around to face her. Jojo, are you jealous? Bah. Why would she be jealous? Miss Chiao snorted stubbornly and glanced at Prince Emo. Are you still going? The Crown Prince immediately shook his head. No. Miss Chiao's little face was no longer so tense. Emolien held her little hand and walked down the stairs. Immediately, she saw Second Uncle Master sitting by the window and looking at her with a ladle-like face. She hurriedly pulled Arbor over. Second Uncle Master. Prince Emo bowed respectfully to Yang Shirong. Yang Shirong, who had wanted to rebuke this fellow, was suddenly speechless. This brat always acted obedient in front of Jojo. That face of his really made her unable to get angry. Jojo, if we want to go through the passage in China, we'll have to wait for at least 4 months. No need. Arbor shook her head. I have my own ways to get there. You don't have to worry about this. As she spoke, the wind chimes at the door rang. A dozen or so women with slender waists walked in from outside, walking towards Crown Prince Emo with a clear goal in mind. Chapter 2200. Emolien's eyelids twitched as a bad premonition flashed across his heart. Sure enough, the dozen or so women were walking towards him. They lined up in a row and bowed to Prince Emo. They said in unison, "Your concubines greet your highness the Crown Prince." Yang Shirong was so angry that her face turned green. She slapped the table so hard that a corner of the table fell to the ground. Who are these people? This stinking brat. My impression of him had changed a little, but I didn't expect him to be this kind of person. Yang Shirong's face was saying, "You're not satisfied with my Chiao, and you're making so many women?" Her expression. If that gaze could be turned into a solid blade, it would probably be able to stab Prince Emo twice. Emolien's face darkened as he suppressed his anger. He glanced at the women. Who are you? We are here on the orders of the Crown Prince of Giant Pain to bring your highness the Crown Prince to the residence for a gathering. Emolien, Crown Prince of Giant Pain, do you want to die? Arbor, Crown Prince of Giant Pain, you're really tired of living. Yang Shirong slammed the table and pulled Arbor away. Jojo, why are you still staying here? Haven't you bullied us enough? Second Uncle Master. Emolien hurriedly stood up and pulled his Chiao to his side. I don't know these people. Just tell them to scram. Arbor glanced at the dozen women with heavy makeup. You're the Crown Prince of Giant Pain's Crown Prince's dancers? The women shook their heads. Yang Shirong's expression softened a little. Who the hell knew who the Crown Prince of Giant Pain was? But since they weren't the Crown Prince of Giant Pain's dancers, they might just be ordinary maids who were dressed a little flirtatiously. Unexpectedly, the leader of the dancers looked shyly at Emolien. We're the Crown Prince's people. The Crown Prince. Arbor, where did this bunch of idiots come from? How dare they pretend to be the Crown Prince's people? The Crown Prince has already given us to your highness. I hope your highness won't despise us for being clumsy. Yang Shirong flipped over the table in front of her at once and pulled Xiao Mu away without another word. The crown prince hurriedly stood up with a dumbfounded expression and chased after the two of them. Young Shirong pulled Arbor and ran at lightning speed. In a flash, they were already far away from the inn. Arbor couldn't help but sigh. He tugged at Yang Shirong's hand and said, "Second martial aunt." Yang Shirong turned to look at her and said seriously, "Child, have you thought it through? When you go to the Divine Land, if you go there as the crown princess, there will be many troubles and dangers." Arbor nodded. "I know, second martial uncle." Yang Shirong looked at her again and said unhappily, "Child, with your qualifications, you can easily find 8 or 10 mo-lien, let alone one. Look at this kid, he's not that good." Yang Shirong continued to ridicule. "He's surrounded by a flock of women. Who knows when someone will shove someone to his side?" "It's fine. The house is big and we need many servants," Arbor said mildly. Second martial aunt's eyes widened. Had he already thought of a way out for the dozen or so kabuki girls? Sweeping, mopping, tidying the courtyard, there will be many officials in the crown prince's residence in the future. There will be places for these people to work. That's right. Chapter 2201. Prince Mo, who had hurried over, heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. He was afraid that Jojo would misunderstand him. Unexpectedly, the little guy trusted him so much. This made him very happy from the bottom of his heart. Have those people been arranged? Arbor glanced sideways at Prince Mo and asked with a snort. "Yes, I've asked the butler to assign them. Let them do some cleaning work in the future. That shouldn't be a problem, right?" Arbor was very satisfied. On the other hand, Yang Shirong's tense face finally relaxed a little. "You really sent them to do the cleaning?" Mo-lien nodded and looked at Yang Shirong seriously. "Second Uncle Master, don't worry. They're only fit to do the cleaning work. I'm afraid they won't be able to do the more delicate work." Yang Shirong was speechless. Sure enough, this Mo-lien was a guy who dug endless pits. But then again, her family's Jojo seemed to have said before that he would send those dancers to do the cleaning work. That the two of them did not speak at all, but in the end, they used the same method to deal with those dancers. It was obvious that the two of them were at the same level of swindling. Yang Shirong didn't know if she should feel comforted or pity for those dancers. "Second Uncle Master, don't worry," Arbor said softly to Yang Shirong. "Lien has never done anything to hurt me in all these days." Yang Shirong looked at Mo-lien and her expression softened a little. Mo-lien hurriedly struck while the iron was hot and continued, "Second Uncle Master, don't worry. I won't do anything that will harm Jojo." Yang Shirong looked at him from head to toe and snorted, "Your status is there for all to see. When we return to China, Jojo said that there won't be any trouble, but I don't believe him." "There will be trouble," Mo-lien said with a very good attitude, "but I'll solve it for Jojo. As long as I'm here, Jojo won't have to face any trouble alone." Yang Shirong nodded her head in acknowledgement of him. Speaking of which, the crown prince was really evil. Yang Shirong thought to herself. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes and witnessed the way he handled things, she really wouldn't have known that under this kid's gentle appearance, there was actually a thick black heart. Arbor reached out and grabbed Prince Mo's hand. "The Crown Prince of Giant Pain has repeatedly urged you to come. Do you still want to go?" "Go, why wouldn't I?" Mo-lien's lips curled into a cold smile. Mo-kun, that brat, had nearly caused his second martial uncle's impression of him to drop below the freezing point. Damn it, second martial uncle already didn't like him enough. Now, it was almost worse. This made Prince Mo extremely unhappy. Prince Mo, who originally didn't plan to attend this banquet, suddenly decided to go. If he didn't go, how could he kill Mo-kun openly? Arbor looked at his expression and looked up to ask, "You've decided to go?" Mo-lien nodded and reached out to hold her delicate wrist. "Let's go together." Miss Chiao pursed her lips. "They didn't invite me." That invitation clearly stated that it was for Mo-lien to go alone. Mo-lien raised his hand with a smile and planted a kiss on the back of her hand. "Come with me. You're my wife. If you don't go, I won't go either." "Inviting me is inviting you," Mo-lien said softly. "We're one." Chapter 2202. Arbor cast a glance at him. "You don't mind that I'm in your way?" Mo Lien was taken aback, but then he smiled and hugged her tightly, gently lifting her up so that she was at eye level with him. My Jojo, you're jealous. Arbor suddenly thought of something. When he turned around and saw Second Uncle Master's feminine face, he immediately exclaimed, Second Uncle Master is beside us. This stinking brat's nonchalant manner was too detestable. Yang Shirong snorted and waved her hand. I can't be bothered with you guys. Make preparations earlier if you're going to China. Don't leave out a single thing that you should prepare. Going to China isn't the same as staying at home. Don't procrastinate and do things that make me uneasy. Procrastinate? Uneasy? Was Second Uncle Master talking about things like kissing and hugging? Mo Lien and the little fellow's beady black eyes met, and he couldn't resist chuckling. He hugged her and gave her a kiss. My Jojo, don't worry. Even if your Uncle Master wants to break up an affectionate couple, it won't work. If she doesn't let me see you, I'll definitely come see you even if I have to climb through the window and dig a tunnel. Thanks. Arbor rolled his eyes at him. That adorable expression tickled Mo Lien. Let's go. I'll dress you up when we return to the room. We'll go meet that fool in a bit. The vassal prince of Giant Pain had been pacing back and forth in the study since early in the morning. At this time, there were two other people sitting in his study. The two of them looked like a pair of twins. They were about 40 years old, and their appearances carried a hint of sharpness and harshness. Vassal Prince, there's no need to be so anxious. One of them couldn't resist shaking his head and saying, You don't know, but that guy is especially formidable. Mo Kun couldn't help but shudder in fear when he recalled the scene that day. The people around Mo Lien didn't look like ordinary people. The moment they made a move, it was obvious that a few minor mystic cultivators absolutely couldn't deal with them. Cheech the twin on the left couldn't help but sneer. That crown prince has been growing up on Sikong planet in the lower realm for several decades. Even if that group of people from the Council of Elders went over to impart their experience, you should also know that in a lower realm place like Sikong planet, the spiritual energy is very thin, and even mystic energy is rarely seen. I've also heard that spirit masters are extremely precious in the lower realms. Another man smiled and said, even if that person started cultivating in his mother's womb, he might not be able to break through to the spirit realm, right? When Mo Kun heard this, he didn't show much joy. Instead, he said very nervously, Then you don't understand the Crown Prince at all. The Crown Prince is definitely not as simple as you think. Your Highness, Your Highness. A man who looked like a manservant quickly walked in and bowed in greeting. Mo Kun's face lit up. Did His Highness the Crown Prince accept the beauties I gave him? The manservant looked at Mo Kun awkwardly, nodded and then shook his head. What do you mean by nodding and shaking your head? Your Highness, then. The Crown Prince did accept the beauties you gave him. Mo Kun slapped his thigh and said joyfully, Then isn't that great? Why are you still shaking your head, punk? I knew it. This Mo Lien was merely putting on an act. Didn't he still accept my beauties? The manservant said with a sullen face, This lowly one heard that the beauties we sent over were all sent to be cleaning maids by Prince Mo's men. You still think that you used the honey trap correctly? Chapter 2203. Mo Kun widened his eyes in shock. Are you telling the truth? Mo Lien, that brat, really sent all the beauties he sent over to sweep the streets. He actually dared to do such a thing. Mo Kun was so angry that his gums hurt. His eyes were dark and gloomy as he stared at the page boy like a venomous snake. The page boy hurriedly crawled on the ground and kowtowed. This is the news I heard. I still have to ask around for the details. Then why aren't you going? Mo Kun roared. Go take a look. Where did he send them to sweep the streets? These were all beauties that were 1 in 1,000. How could he bear to send them away? Mo Kun's heart ached terribly. If he had known that the page boy was so unappreciative, he wouldn't have sent them over. Now, he didn't even know if he could get them back. The page boy was so frightened that he rolled and crawled out of the door. By the time he crawled out of the door, he was already drenched in cold sweat. Recalling Lord Vassal Prince's instructions, he hurriedly ran to ask around. One of the twins, who were in their 40s, sneered. This person really knows how to waste God's gifts. Lord Vassal Prince, Why must we rush over to make our presence known in front of him? Let's not talk about whether this person can return to the divine continent. Even if he can, there's still eldest young master and second young master. The twin laughed sinisterly. Can't we just follow behind and watch the show? Emo-kun rolled his eyes. His voice was somewhat indignant. Previously, I was so frightened by him that I lost my composure. Now that I've regained my senses, I won't show such cowardice. He's just a crown prince who hasn't been acknowledged yet. Lord Vassal Prince sneered. When he returns to the divine continent, he'll get it. Then why did Lord Vassal Prince invite him to a banquet this time? Emo-kun gritted his teeth. Originally, I wanted to connect with him, but now, I think that he's an unappreciative person. Isn't that so? The middle-aged man chuckled. Our old vassal prince is someone who has the right to speak in front of the emperor. TK, someone like him dares to look down on you. Emo-kun raised his hand and stopped the middle-aged man from continuing to flatter him. He asked with a solemn face, "Where's Ah Biao? Where the hell did he go?" My reply just now was completely brainless. Is the crown prince coming or not? Not long after, the manservant who had left hurriedly ran back and bowed in front of Emo-kun. Emo-kun waved his hand impatiently and asked, "How is it? Where did he throw those beauties to? And tonight's banquet, is he coming or not?" If this fellow really didn't give Emo-kun any face, then humph. When he returned, he would immediately report to his father and ask his father, the king of Giant Pain, to come forward and complain about this fellow to the great emperor. When the manservant of Biao heard this, he hurriedly knelt down with a plop and said in a trembling voice, reporting to Lord Heir, "His Highness the Crown Prince, What about him? Tell me." His Highness the Crown Prince ordered a steward to keep those beauties in the guest house where they're staying, to wipe the floor, wipe the stools, and pour the night incense. Smack! Emo-kun, who was burning with rage, smashed the cup in his hand. Say that again. The manservant. Woo-woo, this wasn't something that this lowly one arranged. Chapter 2204. If you keep getting angry at this lowly one, will that accomplish anything? Wouldn't that be of no avail? The page boy criticized him incessantly in his heart, but he didn't dare to show it on his face. He could only smile obsequiously and say, "The beauties have all been left at the inn." Emo-kun immediately jumped up from his seat and smashed basically everything that could be smashed in the living room. He then exclaimed in exasperation, "This punk actually doesn't give me any face. The beauties that he sent over. Never mind that he didn't accept them, but he still brought them back. Not only did he not freaking return them, but he even arranged for them to go to the inn to pour night incense and whatnot. Only this Emo fellow could do such a thing. Oh wait, that's not right. This Emo Lien fellow could do such a thing." Emo-kun was burning with rage. He paced back and forth in the living room, stepping on the porcelain shards beneath his feet. Crunching sounds could be heard as he stepped on them. "Lord Vassal Prince? Scram. Yes, this lowly one will scram right away. As if he had been pardoned, Ah Biao frantically ran out without a care in the world. "Come back." Emo-kun roared angrily. Ah Biao turned around as if he had lost a parent and bowed to Emo-kun, asking, "Lord Vassal Prince, do you have any other instructions? This Emo fellow doesn't give this young master any face at all. Go and bring everyone back from the inn." He wasn't freaking sending them off anymore. Was this how these beautiful young ladies tormented him? He, Emo-kun, had painfully parted with them to let that punk enjoy them, but in the end, smack, he was slapped in the face. Emo-kun paced back and forth in the living room with his hands behind his back. With a long face, Ah Biao timidly asked Emo-kun, "Lord Vassal Prince, are you sure you want to do this? If the people who were sent out were to bring them back, if this matter were to spread to the divine province, it was guaranteed to become the biggest joke in the upper-class circle." As a subordinate, he was completely thinking of Lord Vassal Prince's face. If he did this and Lord Vassal Prince was mocked in the end, the first unlucky one would definitely be him. Lord Vassal Prince definitely wouldn't say that he made the wrong decision back then. Then the one at fault would definitely be him, Ah Biao. Go! Yes. Biao bitterly turned around and was about to leave. The immortal-like couple walking towards him scared him so much that his legs went soft, and he knelt down on the spot. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." The Crown Prince cast a sidelong glance at him. "Haven't you seen my Crown Princess?" "Greetings, Crown Princess. May the Crown Princess have good fortune and peace." Abayo immediately lowered his head. He had a strong desire to live and lay down. Wasn't the Crown Prince's aura a little too strong? Prince Mo grunted. Holding Arbor's little hand, he stepped on the broken porcelain pieces on the ground and walked in front of Mo Kun with a faint smile. "What's wrong? A floor full of fragments to welcome me?" Mo Kun shrunk his neck inexplicably and slowly moved closer to the twin bodyguards. "Greetings, cousin-in-law." Mo Lien looked at him coldly. Mo Kun was speechless. How strange. Suddenly, he felt as if the entire hall was covered in ice. The air was so cold. So cold. Mo Kun took another step back and smiled inexplicably. "Cousin-in-law, you're here so early. This younger brother didn't come out to greet you." Mo Lien glanced at him. There wasn't a hint of a smile in her eyes. "When I walked to the door just now, I heard you say something about returning something to you." Chapter 2205. You tell him. Mo Lien glanced at the page boy, Biao, who was kneeling on the ground. "What do you want to return to your lord heir?" Biao's forehead was drenched in cold sweat. Hey, my uncles, hey. I'm just a page boy. Why did this fire inexplicably come to me?" Biao didn't dare to answer casually. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, replying, "Your Highness, the Lord Heir didn't say anything." "Mo Kun, why don't you tell him?" Mo Lien turned around and looked coldly at this younger cousin of hers. It was said that the king of Giant Pain was his father's favorite youngest brother. In the imperial capital, the king of Giant Pain's status was second only to his father. Therefore, these sons of his were considered to be very precious and favored by the heavens. The king of Giant Pain's heir was ranked third and was the legitimate son of the king of Giant Pain's family. He even had 2 concubine-born brothers above him and seemed to be quite capable. This was the information that Mo Lien had received for the time being. In the end, Mo Lien didn't need to care about these people at all. His status was there. As long as he returned to the divine continent, all the princes and princesses would have to give way to him. The king of Giant Pain's heir only wanted to go home and find his father. He took a step back in fear and instantly regretted his careless words just now. It was just a few beauties. If he gave them to his cousin, the crown prince, he could do whatever he wanted with them. For the sake of these beauties, he had to go against the crown prince. This was not a wise move. Mo Kun didn't know that in Arbor's eyes, his current appearance was instant cowardice. The crown prince actually had such a cowardly brother. Arbor immediately glanced at her husband with disdain and rubbed her little hand hard against his palm, wanting to pull it out. The crown prince, that every time he saw his younger cousin, he freaking felt vexed. Jojo didn't seem to like his cowardly cousin. Not only that, he seemed to despise him every time because his cousin was too cowardly. That Prince Mo, who felt very wronged, became angrier the more he looked at his cousin. The king of Giant Pain was a hero of his generation. How did he raise such a coward? "Your Highness the Crown Prince." One of the twins suddenly spoke and cupped his hands towards Prince Mo. Prince Mo glanced at him coldly, his gaze landing on him. "For you, I am Lao Hai, the personal bodyguard of the Crown Prince of Giant Pain Palace. This is my younger brother, Lao Jiang." The middle-aged man called Lao Hai said faintly, "I have a few words, but I don't know if I should say them." "What status do you have to speak to me?" Prince Mo's eyes flashed with a cold light. It was so dark that people couldn't help but feel frightened. Lao Hai's face darkened slightly as he suddenly took a step forward. Xiao Mu only felt a gust of air slanting toward her. He is indeed a bold person. Mo Lien raised his hand and pulled her into his embrace. With a flick of his sleeve, he completely waved away the spiritual energy that Lao Hai released. At the same time, a cold light flashed in his eyes and a fire arrow shot out from his sleeve. With lightning speed, it shot towards Lao Hai's face. Lao Hai was shocked. He didn't expect the Crown Prince's speed to be so fast. It was already too late for him to dodge. As he rolled on the ground, his left arm was already pierced through by the fire arrow. That speed was so fast that it was almost impossible to see with the naked eye. Lao Hai wanted to react, but it was already too late. He opened his mouth and cried out. Chapter 2206. Bang! Lao Hai was instantly sent flying, tumbling to the ground. With a pu sound, he spat out a large amount of blood. Eldest brother. Lao Jiang was shocked. He quickly went forward to help him up, but unexpectedly he heard Lao Hai's cry of alarm. Second brother, be careful. Eldest brother. The two brothers were simultaneously sent flying by the two palm force winds. Following the force, they rolled out without any ability to resist. One heavily crashed into the cabinet at the side, while the other was fiercely flung against the wall. The one who crashed into the cabinet had the cabinet fall down, smashing into his lower back. The one on the wall was even more miserable. His entire head went through the wall, and he was stuck on the wall, unable to get down for the time being. With the Crown Prince's attack, the entire hall fell silent. The Crown Prince of the King of Giant Pain staggered back a dozen steps, hiding behind the armchair. He looked at the Crown Prince with a somewhat frightened expression, and said with a trembling voice, Cousin, let's talk things out, talk things out. He was just saying that Mo Lien, this punk, had astonishing combat prowess. This Lao Hai and Lao Jiang didn't even know Crown Prince Mo's background, yet they dared to rush up and spout nonsense. They really weren't too smart. Looking at the two bodyguards beside him who could be considered presentable, then thinking about the two attendants beside his eldest brother and second brother, Mo Kun couldn't help but feel a little stifled. Although he was the legitimate son of the King of Giant Pain and had successfully inherited the title of Crown Prince according to the ancestral rules passed down by the old ancestors, his father still loved his eldest brother, who was proficient in both the pen and the sword, the most. Even the attendant beside his eldest brother was an expert whose cultivation was close to the god realm. As for the two people beside him, Lao Hai and Lao Jiang were only 10th level great spiritual masters. In the middle 6 prefectures and the lower star domain, they were definitely presentable. However, in places like the upper 3 prefectures, it was hard to explain. Wait a minute. Mo Kun seemed to have thought of something. He frowned and racked his brains for a while. Suddenly, his expression changed as he looked at Prince Mo. This cousin of his took care of 2 10th level great spiritual masters within a few breaths of time with a wave of his hand? Then his realm, what was it? Mo Kun couldn't help but feel a little scared. He hugged the armchair and took a few steps back. Don't come over, he shouted at Mo Lien. Cousin, we're from the same sect, we share the same surname. You can't be so ruthless to me. My father, he is your uncle. Mo Kun. Ah yes. Mo Kun hurriedly nodded in response. However, he hugged the armchair and took a few steps back. When Arbor saw his cowardly appearance, he looked down on the Mo family even more. She anxiously tried to pull her little hand out of Mo Lien's palm, but to no avail. Mo Lien! Because of this crazy Mo Kun, not only was he misunderstood by second martial uncle, he even caused Jojo to look down on the Mo family. Cousin, I'm telling you, if there's anything between us, let's talk about it calmly. Then, those beauties that I gave you, you can do whatever you want with them, it's fine. You can leave them in the inn to sweep the floor or pour the night incense, I won't care. What can you do? Arbor snorted rudely. He raised his little hand and shouted, What are you still standing there for? Send a gift in return. Mo Kun's eyes immediately widened. His nerves were strangely tense. What? There was a gift in return. Chapter 2207. Mo Kun, what's with this ominous feeling? As soon as Qiao Mu mentioned returning a gift or something, his nerves immediately tensed up. No need. Mo Kun hurriedly said. Little cousin-in-law, actually, you don't have to return the gift. Arbor coldly swept a glance at him. Bring it over. What are you doing? Stop it. Mo Kun widened his eyes and instinctively retreated a few steps while hugging his armchair. He stared warily at Arbor and hurriedly signaled the two guards with his eyes. Unfortunately, Lao Jiang had just helped his older brother, who had vomited blood, up from the ground. The two of them looked pale as they supported each other. They were afraid of being beaten up by Prince Mo and didn't dare to step forward for the time being. A string of familiar groans traveled in from outside the door. Mo Kun hugged his armchair and hid behind the table. When his gaze landed on the door, his eyes immediately widened. He saw a group of burly men carrying 10 fat sows walk in from outside the door. They squealed as they squeezed through the door. Fortunately, the hall of Mo Kun's temporary residence was big enough. With over 20 people carrying 10 sows, it didn't feel crowded at all. The stewards and servants of the heir who heard the news were all stunned. They all looked at the legendary little crown princess as if they were looking at a murderous shark. The pitiful heir hugged his armchair and exclaimed, "Cousin-in-law, what are you trying to do? What are you trying to do? This fellow actually carried so many pigs over as a return gift?" Mo Kun had the urge to cry. Could it be that this scary little cousin-in-law wanted him to eat all 10 of these pigs in one day? Arbor pinched his chubby hands and looked expressionlessly at the wailing Mo Kun. "What are you all standing there for? Do it." The guards who followed the little crown princess silently swallowed their saliva and hurriedly went forward to twist Mo Kun's arms, who couldn't stop struggling. With both of Mo Kun's arms held down, the armchair he was hugging naturally fell to the ground. He was on the verge of tears as she looked at Prince Mo with fear and trepidation, her eyes almost overflowing with tears. Cousin? You? Aren't you going to control your wife? What was she trying to do? Cousin. I'm telling you, don't mess around. I can't eat so much pork. Nonsense. Arbor scolded. Take him away. Mo Lien rubbed her forehead speechlessly and silently turned her face to the side. To be honest, he had no idea Jojo was up to something like this. It was no wonder that the little fellow had solemnly asked him to wait for a while when he left the house, saying that she wanted to prepare a return gift for Mo Kun. He thought it was a gift in return. His wife had actually prepared 10 sows for Mo Kun. This was really only someone with her brain could think of such a thing. Jojo? Mo Lien called out to his little wife in a small voice. Arbor glanced at him and expressionlessly turned her little face away. Let's go. The guards escorted Mo Kun all the way to the dining area in the rear garden. The steward of the heir apparent followed behind with a long face. After chasing after the group for a while, he called out breathlessly, "Crown Princess, what are you trying to do?" Arbor saw an empty cow, sheep, and horse pen from afar. She waved her hand and said coldly, "Put them all in." Chapter 2208. The 20 or so strong men hurriedly walked forward, looked at each other, and hurriedly put the 10 sows in. "Where is he?" The corners of the guards' mouths twitched as they hurriedly escorted the wailing and struggling Mo Kun forward. They lowered their heads and bowed. "Crown Princess?" The little crown princess was expressionless as she said with a cold face, "Why aren't you inviting Prince Giant Pain in?" One of the guards' mouths twitched as he forcefully held back his laughter. He said in an extremely calm voice, "Prince Giant Pain, please." "What are you doing? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to do, aw?" Prince Giant Pain let out extremely tragic cries. Prince Giant Pain struggled with his two arms and hugged whatever he saw as he was dragged over while hugging the fence. Emolien, the Arbor's small face was cold as he watched Prince Giant Pain cling to the fence at the door with all his might. The guards were unable to escort him in. The little guy took a few steps forward and kicked him in the butt. Emolien, the bam. Prince Giant Pain was so pitiful that he rolled forward and was forced to fall into the pigsty, biting into a piece of mud on the ground. His front teeth almost fell out, and 2 streams of tears suddenly flowed down. "Close the door." At Xiao Mu's command, several royal guards swiftly locked up the fence door. "Everyone, you can't do this." The steward pounced forward and lay down at Emolien's feet. That page boy Biao was also scared to death. He scrambled over with a pale face and kowtowed repeatedly to Emolien. Your Highness the Crown Prince, Your Highness the Crown Prince, please spare my life. Emolien, this prince didn't do anything. What's with this prince is utterly devoid of conscience expression. Arbor leaped up and stood on the fence door, coldly looking at Prince Giantpain, who was rolling around in the pigsty. With a wave of her hand, a faint fragrance of powder drifted into the pigsty. Arbor watched expressionlessly as the 10 sows suddenly became restless and madly chased after the Crown Prince of Giantpain. He turned his back in disgust and jumped down from the fence. Guards! Fetch some buckets of water. Reporting to Your Highness, reporting to the Crown Princess, the guests attending the banquet are here. Oh. Emolien turned her head to look at the servant who reported. Who are they? Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Six Sons Sect, Heavenly Fortune Sect, and other major sects' sect masters, elite disciples, and so on. Bring them over, Emolien said indifferently. Bring it here? Your Highness the Crown Prince. The steward wailed on the ground. Why not? The masters are all here. Aren't you here for a banquet? Isn't a banquet supposed to have some entertainment? Crown Prince Mo waved his hand impatiently. What Lu Su, have them all come over. Steward! Exclamation point. Was it the trend to let the masters act as performers for this extra entertainment at banquets nowadays? The servant accepted the order with an embarrassed expression. The others didn't even dare to utter a word. They all silently lowered their heads and stood solemnly at the two sides, hating that they had 2 ears to hear so much. At this moment, everyone hated that they couldn't just be a block of wood. His Highness the Crown Prince could even discipline the Crown Prince of Giantpain without any explanation, let alone these small fries. Who dared to be the bird that stuck its head out and provoke this fiendish couple? Chapter 2209. The sect master of the Six Sons Sect, Qingguang, walked over with a few Six Sons Sect disciples. When he saw Prince Mo from afar, he hurriedly went forward to greet him. Your Highness, it's an honor to meet you. Prince Mo nodded at him indifferently. Sect Master Qingguang's bald head was extremely dazzling under the setting sun. The middle-aged man who was a few steps away from him had an ordinary appearance, but his voice was loud and clear. I'm Wu Nyozi from the Heavenly Fortune Sect. Greetings, Your Highness. Wu Jin followed behind his father with a complicated expression. He looked at Emolien and Arbor with a strange expression. These two people had left a deep impression on him in Liangyuan Medicine Store. Those people from Hongyuan Island had suffered greatly in the hands of this couple. He would never forget Madame Zhang's strange expression before she died. So these two people were the Crown Prince and Crown Princess from the Divine Land? It was no wonder that people with such prominent identities were so ruthless and weren't afraid of causing trouble at all. Wu Jin also abruptly turned his head. Sure enough, he saw Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing half a step behind him, glaring furiously at Xiaomu. Wu Jin was about to remind young Mistress Zhang when he saw the scene in the pigsty. His eyes widened, and the hair on his head almost exploded. Oh, Master Tian, the one who was locked in the pigsty and running around in circles, wasn't that the unlucky Prince of Giantpain himself? Everyone's eyes couldn't help but twitch. The Crown Prince of the Giantpain Wang family was so unlucky? At this moment, he was running back and forth in the inner circle like a madman, gasping for breath. The scariest thing was that there were 10 running pigs behind him that everyone looked at each other in silence with a strange expression. They were all stunned. What was going on with the Crown Prince of Giantpain? Mo Kun ran until he was half dead. He only felt that the herd of pigs running behind him was very scary. He felt that if he dared to stop, he would probably be torn apart by the pigs in the next second. Your Highness, Your Highness. Qingguang hastily walked forward and called out loudly. He looked on helplessly as the Crown Prince of Giantpain ran past in front of him. The head of the Heavenly Fortune Sect, Wu Nyozi, hurriedly turned around and hurriedly bowed towards Emolien. Your Highness, I don't know if there's some misunderstanding between the heir and myself. What are you doing? Prince Mo glanced at him indifferently. What do you know? The Crown Princess is giving you a gift in return. Mo Lien swept a glance at Wu Nyozi, who was making a fuss over nothing and hadn't seen the world. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain was scared out of his wits by the herd of pigs. He leaped up, wanting to leap up. Unexpectedly, his body was just suspended in midair when he was struck down by a tyrannical air current. He almost slipped into the herd of pigs. He hastily used his 2 hands to cling onto the fence, hanging onto it. He shrieked, "No, don't. Let me out. Little cousin-in-law, hurry and let me out. Cousin. Xiao Mu walked up a few steps and icily said with a stoic face, "What? You don't like the gift I'm giving you in return? Who the hell would like this kind of gift?" Mo Kun was ravaged to the point of tears and snot overflowing. His hands clung onto the fence tightly, refusing to let go. He didn't want to talk about his image anymore. Chapter 22:10. His entire body was hanging from the door, and his 2 legs couldn't help but curl upwards. At this moment he could only feel the herd of pigs circling around his feet, as if he lowered his feet by half an inch, those pigs would gnaw on both his legs. It was too terrifying. Mo Kun kept crying as he said, "Let me out, little cousin-in-law. What did I do wrong for you to treat me like this? Let me out." Arbor couldn't help but be enraged when he heard that. "You don't like my return gift?" Mo Kun was just about to nod when he caught sight of Arbor's icy gaze. His heart trembled, and he hurriedly shook his head. I like it. No. It's me, little cousin-in-law." "What?" Mo Kun was in tears. His legs that were hanging from the door kept kicking upwards, and he was so scared that he pissed his pants, his face drained of color. Arbor glanced at him coldly and asked leisurely, "Are you still going to give the Crown Prince a gift later?" "No, I won't. Mo Kun had already pissed his pants. Don't freaking talk about giving a gift. He wouldn't give anything. Would he still dare to give a gift? Didn't he just give His Highness the Crown Prince a bunch of flirtatious beauties? In the end, the Crown Princess gave him a bunch of old sows as a return gift. This gift was really unique. To us. Completely different from anyone else's return gift. Arbor nodded when he heard that. He glanced at a guard beside him and took out a thin piece of paper from his inner world. "Sign it for him." That guard's mouth twitched, and he hurriedly took the pen and paper with both hands. He turned and walked quickly to Mo Kun, who was still clinging to the door. He handed the pen and paper to Mo Kun. Mo Kun wasn't in the mood to read at this moment. He hurriedly reached out to sign it after receiving it, and he cried out tearfully, "Little cousin-in-law, Crown Princess, hurry and let me go, Crown Princess." He had agreed to everything, signed the paper, and even apologized repeatedly. What was this devilish Crown Princess waiting for? Why didn't they let him go? Arbor reached out and took the thing he signed. After looking at it, he nodded and raised his hand to shake the thin piece of paper in his hand. "Remember what you've signed." Xiao Mu stated coldly, "In the future, if there are still people who want to gift this and that to the Crown Prince, this Crown Prince Consort guarantees that the return gift I will give you will definitely satisfy all of you and satisfy all of you. Everyone!" Exclamation point. Was the Crown Princess venting her anger on the Crown Prince of Giant Pain? Arbor then turned around and stomped back to Mo Lien's side. Mo Lien smiled and reached out to hold her little hand. She turned around and led her out. "Are you happy now, Jojo?" If he did not let the little guy vent his anger, the one who would be in trouble would be him. Thank the heavens. Thank the Crown Prince of Giant Pain. This time, the little fellow should be able to calm down. As expected, the expression on Miss Chiao's face eased a little, and she nodded reluctantly. "Weakling, I don't even have the desire to teach him a lesson." The Crown Prince, seeing the two of them walk out hand in hand, the steward and the others didn't dare to stop them. After the two of them walked a little further away, the steward hurriedly called Biao to come forward and rescue his master from the gate with tears in his eyes. At this moment, the Crown Prince of Giant Pain was already paralyzed on the ground. His legs were trembling nonstop, and he even wet his pants from fright. Classmate Dun Zong, who had been watching the show the entire time, was speechless. The little girl was indeed incomparably ferocious. Seeing how she scared the Crown Prince of Giant Pain into a dog, As a bystander, he felt a little satisfied. I'm going to sleep, and everything will return to normal tomorrow. Chapter 22:11. Dun Zhu pretended to show concern. How are you feeling? Crown Prince Giant Pain. Cough, if you're not feeling well, don't force yourself. Quickly help the Crown Prince back to his room. Sect Master Qing Guang of Six Sons Sect turned back to look at the Crown Prince's back with a complicated expression. This Crown Prince actually did such a thing to his own cousin in front of so many family heads. He didn't give them any face at all. It was obvious that he wasn't someone who was easy to get along with. However, it made sense. The Crown Prince of the Divine Province was there. Crown Prince Giant Pain must have had nothing better to do to go against him. In the end, not only did he almost lose his life, he also lost all his face in front of everyone. All the family heads stood there awkwardly. They didn't know if they should escape immediately or continue to be a part of the background. Dun Zhu still went forward and reached out with a smile to help the embarrassed Crown Prince Giant Pain up. Crown Prince Giant Pain, are you alright? Do I look like I'm alright? Crown Prince Giant Pain suddenly roared. He was in a crazy state now, and he didn't even care about Dun Zhu and the others. He just wanted to shout out all the anger in his chest. The volume of his voice was so loud that it scared the surrounding family heads, and they all frowned and took a few steps back. Crown Prince Giant Pain supported his manservant, Biao, and stood up shakily. He felt that his legs were still trembling uncontrollably. Mo Kun shouted sternly, Lian, Arbor, I won't let you off. This matter couldn't end like this. Mo Lian, that fellow, condoned his wife to treat him like this. He must report him to royal father. Damn Mo Lian, damn Arbor, this black-hearted couple. He definitely wouldn't let them off. Crown Prince Giant Pain. Biao said with a mournful face. His Highness the Crown Prince isn't easy to deal with. Let's return to the Divine Province first. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain retracted his hand and gave him a slap. He shrieked in exasperation. Shut up. Biao covered his face and took a few steps back in fear. The Crown Prince of Giant Pain pointed at the sky and cursed, You will pay the price for this. Oh, what's the price? A cold voice came from outside the crowd. Mo Kun simply didn't expect that Mo Lian and Xiao Mu, this black-hearted pair, would actually return and appear before them again at this time. Mo Kun was so scared that he pissed his pants on the spot. He quickly pushed the butler and Biao in front of him as a shield. He shrunk behind the butler and Biao, only popping out half of his head as he screamed, You guys, what else do you want? I'm warning you. Don't do anything stupid. Don't act recklessly. Mo Kun raised his voice and let out a series of dying duck cries. Arbor walked up to Mo Kun expressionlessly and hooked his little finger at him. What are you doing? Mo Kun's nerves tensed up. He hugged the butler's waist tightly and refused to let go. The old housekeeper's face turned a little green. His waist was in pain from the Crown Prince's tight grip. Bring him here. At Xiao Mu's command, several royal guards immediately swarmed forward and pinned Mo Kun's hands behind his back without a care, escorting him to Xiao Mu. Mo Kun's eyes widened in horror. What did you do to me? Chapter 22:12. From the moment he entered the pigsty just now, he already realized that he could not muster any spiritual energy in his body, much less leap up. Even escaping seemed so difficult. Mo Kun was too scared. At that moment, he only felt that he was so insignificant in this world, so weak that he was comparable to a tiny ant. It was as if the other party only needed to stomp on him and flatten him. Little cousin-in-law, I was wrong. I know that I was wrong. Don't make things difficult for me, all right? I will definitely not send beautiful women to cousin-in-law in the future. Mo Kun's tears streamed down his face as he looked at Arbor with a frightened expression. Whoever sent beautiful women to the Crown Prince would be a big idiot. What kind of Hudong lioness did the Crown Prince marry? Look, he only sent over a dozen beautiful women, and she could not even tolerate it? Shut up. Arbor angrily slapped him heavily on the shoulder. That lad immediately fell to the ground with a plop like a soft-footed prawn. Arbor forcefully grabbed one of his arms and pulled with all her might. Emo-kun screamed like a pig being slaughtered. He only felt that his entire arm was being pinched in someone's palm and was being held behind his back. It was extremely painful. "What are you screaming for?" Arbor impatiently slapped the back of his neck forcefully. "Shut up." Emo-kun's voice became softer, and he sobbed. He only wanted to go home and hug his father to cry properly. The crown prince's wife was too fierce. With this kind of personality, which man could stand it? Break, 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 crown princess, break, 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 sob sob. Emo-kun only felt that his entire arm did not seem to belong to him anymore. The pain of being held behind his back kept surging in his heart. Arbor forcefully shook the arm that was holding Emo-kun. Gulp. A small box suddenly rolled out of Emo-kun's sleeve and landed on the ground. Arbor stretched out her leg and kicked the box, causing it to fly up and land in her hands. "Ah, this is... Crown Princess, you can't snatch mine?" Put. Without another word, Arbor swept his sleeve across Emo-kun's face. Emo-kun's head fell to the ground with a thud. Arbor tossed the box in his hand and glanced at the person lying on the ground with disdain. "You can find trouble with me at any time. But it's best to be prepared for a short life." The little fellow threw the box into his inner world, snorted, and walked to the crown prince's side without looking back. Emo-lien helplessly reached out to hold her little hand. "What's in that box?" It turned out that the reason why the little fellow had dragged him back was because of this box in Emo-kun's sleeve. Chiochio said this is a snow ginseng fruit seed. The little fellow cast a glance at Emo-lien, who was lying on the ground, then looked up at Emo-lien and said, "I'll plant it for you to eat." Emo-lien nodded. "Is it delicious?" "Yes." Miss Chiao nodded her small head. "It's even more delicious than the winter fruit. If ordinary people eat it regularly, it can also prolong their life. When it's grandmother's birthday, we can go home and give it to her." "Okay." Emo-lien grinned and patted her little head. The young couple held hands and were really going to leave this time. Zhang Wuxiang, who was standing at the side, looked slightly agitated. Just as she was about to move, Wu Jini, who was paying close attention to her movements, reached out and pulled her back. Wu Jini also lowered his voice and asked Zhang Wuxiang, "What are you doing?" "This slut killed my mother. Shouldn't I kill her for revenge?" Chapter 22:13. Why don't you wait 2 more days until the people from Great Source Island arrive? Wu Jini frowned. "You'll only be humiliating yourself if you rush up now." Zhang Wuxiang recalled Arbor and Emo-lien's skills and couldn't help but feel a little discouraged. Although Wu Jini was a useless coward, he was still quite smart. What he said wasn't wrong. If she rushed out to settle the score with Arbor and his wife now, she definitely wouldn't be able to get anything out of it. Zhang Wuxiang stopped in her tracks indignantly. She glared hatefully at Arbor and his wife's backs as she reluctantly watched them leave. The crown prince of Giant Pain, who had been ravaged, once again lost all the strength in his body and collapsed on the ground. A Biao hurriedly crawled forward and reached out to help him up. Prince? Prince. Return to the Divine Prefecture. Return to the Divine Prefecture immediately. Prince of Giant Pain was so angry that his lips trembled and his entire body trembled. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture immediately to find his biological father. He didn't want to continue staying in this damned place any longer. He wanted to find his father. He wanted to return to the Divine Prefecture. Biao nodded repeatedly. Yes. It's just that we have to wait 2 more days before we can leave through that special passage. Return immediately. Prince of Giant Pain screamed. The Heavenly Fortune sect master, Wu Nyozi, twitched his eyes and couldn't help but say, "Prince is tired. You'd better help him back to his room to rest." The Crown Prince of Giant Pain's eyes suddenly widened as if he wanted to eat someone. His gaze circled Wu Nyozi, Qin Guang, and the others, and he shrieked, You, why are you all here?" His disgraceful appearance just now and when he was forced to kneel on the ground by the Crown Princess, saw all of it. Only then did Prince of Giant Pain come back to his senses and realize that the patriarchs and elite disciples of Shuntian Prefecture's aristocratic families were all gathered here. Qin Guang hurriedly cupped his hands and smiled apologetically. Prince, Qin Guang will take his leave first. Farewell. Farewell. The patriarchs cupped their hands and bowed. Then, they hurriedly led their disciples out of the hall. The crown prince of Jianping's furious roar came from behind. Who is it? Who brought them all here? Who is it? Regardless of how hysterical the crown prince of Jianping was, Arbor and Emolian walked out of the residence hand in hand, heading towards the inn they were staying at. Let's go buy a house. Arbor suddenly said, I think we should stay here for a few more days. It's not convenient to do things in the inn. Emolian's eyes lit up. She grabbed Arbor's hand and pressed it against her chest. Jojo, do you want to spend some time alone with me? You think too much. Arbor looked up at him and suddenly remembered what Fan Meng and Fan Yu had said that day. He tilted his head and thought for a while. Then, he flipped his hand and took out a pot of blooming ink-colored lotus from his inner world. You can have it. I planted it myself, Arbor said expressionlessly. Emolian reached out and took the lotus from her. He hugged it in his arms and looked at it again and again. He held it lovingly. Jojo, you're giving it to me? Arbor nodded. I planted it myself. There's only one of its kind in the world. Do you like it? Emolian nodded vigorously. I like it, I like it. Of course I like it very much. Xiao Mu beckoned at him with her small hand, indicating for him to bend down. Emolian blinked and leaned closer to her. What's wrong? Chapter 22:14. Miss Qiao suddenly reached out her hands and circled them around his neck. She pulled him down and kissed him hard on the cheek. Emolian, I like you. All right, the confession was over. The gift had been given and the confession was over. Miss Qiao felt that she had completed an important task and nodded at herself satisfactorily. She then released her hand and turned around to walk away in small steps, not caring about the dazed His Highness the Crown Prince. At this moment, the two of them had just exited Prince Jianping's residence. There were quite a lot of people on the bustling street. The little fellow's voice was quite loud. So that at this moment, the passers-by on the street were all looking at the two of them with strange gazes. Miss Qiao quickly squeezed into a small alley. She reached out a small fist and smashed it hard on her own head. Her brain was damaged. After the confession, she realized that she had actually made such an outlandish and bold action on a bustling street. It's over, it's over, it's over, it's all because this man was too alluring. She was so confused that she couldn't even think straight. Arbor reached out to cup her slightly hot little face and hesitated on the spot for a moment. Just as she was about to turn around and look for Emolian, she suddenly felt a strong gust of wind from behind her head, attacking the back of her neck with incomparable speed. Arbor's gaze turned cold. She quickly leaned to the side, her sleeves fluttering as she leaped onto the top of the wall with a whoosh. Her pair of cold eyes were suffused with a cold light as she stared coldly at the person below the wall. That person didn't manage to hit her in one strike and didn't say much to her. He directly took advantage of her and leaped up, aiming for her face. This speed. Arbor's heart slightly choked. She turned around and leaped, her long black hair gliding in a perfect arc in midair. After landing on the ground with a whoosh, Arbor rushed towards where Emolian was. However, two people quickly appeared in front of her and attacked her from the front and back, launching fierce attacks at her chest and back. The surging spiritual energy came straight at her. Just as the attack was about to land on her, Tong Jianjian's figure suddenly appeared beside Arbor. He crossed his arms to block the attack. Emolian, who had heard the news, immediately saw the strangers attacking Jojo. She narrowed her eyes and said angrily, "What are you doing?" When they saw him appear, they seemed to be slightly afraid and quickly exchanged glances with each other. Seeing that the group of people were about to retreat, Emolian rushed towards Jojo. He stretched out his arms but did not have time to catch his wife. Suddenly he saw a large net being thrown down from the sky. Like catching a fish, it caught his Qiao in an instant. Without another word, it pulled her and quickly leaped up. A bird's cry came from the sky. Emolian's expression was furious. She raised her head and saw a huge strange bird dragging the net. It flapped its wings and flew up a few times before it completely disappeared. Little 7. Mo Lien shouted in exasperation. These people actually snatched away his wife right in front of his eyes? Mo Lien leaped onto the dragon's body. Taking Tong and the others, they quickly chased after the bird. After less than half an incense stick's time, the still air in the small alley once again rippled like water. The strange bird appeared in the air, and the net in its claws appeared. Qi Lianhai's expression was slightly gloomy as he appeared in the small alley again with his people. He beckoned with his hand, and that strange bird dragging the net fell from the sky and landed in front of them. Qi Lianhai gazed coldly at Xiao Mu, who was inside the net, and gave her a sinister smile. It really wasn't easy to wait for you to be alone. Chapter 22:15. Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. Mo Lien was so worried that she was confused, and she was tricked by the middle-aged man in front of her. In fact, Qi Lianhai had only used an invisibility talisman on them to temporarily hide everyone's presence. But with Mo Lien's intelligence, she would probably return in less than a minute. So, all right, take her away immediately. Qi Lianhai was a cautious person. Although he had tricked the crown prince of the divine province into leaving, he knew that he wouldn't be able to fool him for long. Qi Lianhai's subordinates all pointed their weapons at Arbor in the net, warning her not to act rashly. Qi Lianhai sneered. Don't worry, we don't want your life. We just want to ask the crown princess to come with us. Of course, you don't need to waste your energy trying to break this net. Qi Lianhai looked at her triumphantly. This net can not only block your spiritual energy and presence, but you should have noticed by now that you can't even use your spiritual sense. Arbor looked at him coldly. Take her away. At Qi Lianhai's order, the strange bird pulled up the net again and rushed into the sky. Qi Lianhai and the others quickly summoned their spiritual beast mounts and left with the strange bird. The group had only left for less than half a minute when Mo Lien's figure reappeared on the horizon. She returned to the alley where Arbor was taken away with Tong and the others. She stared gloomily at the empty alley and subconsciously clenched her fists. Was it Fong Su of the Greenwood Guard? Mo Lien asked angrily. Go. Gather all the hidden guards in Shuntian Prefecture and dig Fong Su out. With that, Mo Lien leaped onto Yen Qi's back again and had him chase after Arbor's presence. Lord Qi, we can't do it. She's too fast. A subordinate beside Qi Lianhai urgently reported. Qi Lianhai had also sensed Prince Mo's approach. He frowned and said, I've already blocked her presence. How did she catch up so quickly? For you. Arbor stood in the net, swaying left and right in the wind, but his face was still expressionless as he looked at Qi Lianhai. Qi Lianhai sneered. Crown Princess doesn't need to know who I am. All you need to know is that from today onwards, your good days are over. Really? Qi Lianhai smiled and opened a bottle of medicinal liquid in his hand. He quickly rushed to the red-beaked bird's side and fed it the entire bottle of medicinal liquid. The strange bird immediately let out a cry and flapped its wings even more vigorously. Its speed seemed to have more than doubled as it flew forward. Arbor looked at them coldly and sized up Qi Lianhai. I've never seen you before. You don't have to try to get information out of me. Qi Lianhai said with a smile, I was only ordered to bring you back. As for what will happen in the future, you'll have to pray for yourself. Xiao Mu leisurely swallowed a pill and stared at Qi Lianhai with a cold glint in her eyes. You think that victory is already in your grasp? What? Could it be that Crown Princess still has the strength to resist? Qi Lianhai smiled proudly at her. This sky cicada net of mine isn't some ordinary item. It's more than enough to trap a great spirit master, let alone a little spirit master like you. Arbor glanced at him. Chapter 22:16. A pair of claws were suddenly covered with a Vajra talisman. Like cutting vegetables and tofu, she stretched out her fingers and gently swiped at the net. Qi La, the originally smug Qi Lianhai couldn't help but frown slightly. Qi La, after another tearing sound, Arbor directly drilled out of the net. She flipped over and landed on the back of the strange bird. Then she slammed her fist down on its big head. Her punch, which was imbued with the Vajra talisman, immediately caused the strange bird to shriek. Its body plummeted to the ground like a cannonball, with its head facing down and its legs facing up. When it was 1 foot from the ground, Arbor's figure suddenly spun in a parabolic arc in the air and rushed up again with a whoosh. However, the strange bird landed heavily on the ground with a howl. Its skull came into close contact with the ground and smashed its skull into pieces on the spot. There was no possibility of treatment at all. Xiao Mu hovered in the air and coldly gazed at that large bird that had already died. She then turned around and looked at the dumbfounded Qi Lianhai with a spurious smile. Qi Lianhai! Exclamation point. He didn't expect the crown princess to come out so easily. That heavenly cicada net was actually completely destroyed by this destructive woman in front of him. Qi Lianhai only felt like he was holding a breath in his heart. It was as if he couldn't spit it all out, and his entire chest felt uncomfortable. However, Arbor didn't wait for him to react and punched him hard in the stomach. Qi Lianhai couldn't resist this force. His whole body was beaten into the air, and his back hit several subordinates. Qi Lianhai's subordinates really exerted a Herculean effort to catch Qi Lianhai. Even so, they still carried Qi Lianhai's body and staggered back a few steps. After stabilizing his body with great difficulty, Qi Lianhai looked at Arbor angrily. He covered his painful stomach with one hand and shouted in a trembling voice, This damn little girl was trapped in the sky cicada net, and she actually had the strength to retaliate? He had really underestimated her. Arbor stretched out a small hand and waved a bronze plate in front of him. Qi Lianhai's expression changed, and he stretched out his hand to touch his waist. Sure enough, the copper plate that he had stuffed into his waist had actually disappeared at some unknown time. Arbor looked at the waist token over and over again, then raised his head to glance at Qi Lianhai. A cold smile faintly appeared on his lips. So, it's Ani Prefecture's personal attendant. I didn't expect you all to be in such a good mood, coming all the way from an Prefecture to Shuntian Prefecture to catch me? Arbor swung his hand and threw Qi Lianhai's waist token back to him. Here you go. In any case, she had no use for it. Only Qi Lianhai and his group took this small token seriously. Jojo. When Arbor heard the Crown Prince's voice from afar, his eyes couldn't help but light up slightly. He turned his head and looked toward the sky. In the clear blue sky, the Crown Prince was moving over like a bolt of lightning. In no more than a moment, he suddenly stopped beside Arbor and reached out to pull her into a tight embrace. His heart finally settled down. He reached out to hug her and sighed softly. Jojo. Arbor reflexively reached out to stroke his chest. It's fine. Chapter 22:17. Mo Lian was truly a bit too horrified. It had only been a blink of an eye, yet his wife was almost kidnapped on the streets? No one would be able to bear this matter. A second ago, Jojo was still happily confessing to him with flowers, but the next second, she was almost kidnapped. It was already fortunate that the Crown Prince didn't lose his cool on the spot when he saw the little fellow being dragged away by that strange bird. Fortunately, he reacted in time and rushed back, allowing him to catch up with this group of people. Mo Lian raised her hand to rub Arbor's head. At this moment, she could still feel her heart thumping wildly. Husband, these people were sent by Ani Prefecture? Arbor glowered at Qi Lianhai. Ani Prefecture's people had also interfered in the destruction of the Holy Water Sect. She hadn't even found the time to deal with them, but she didn't expect this group of people to deliver themselves to death first. Mo Lian flicked her sleeve and shot out a fire spirit, which heavily crashed into a man behind Qi Lianhai. Just now, it was that person who dragged the net and aimed a sharp blade at his Jojo's back. That man was caught off guard and was hit by the fire spirit. He flew several meters away and rolled twice when he landed with a bang. Qi Lianhai looked back and couldn't help but be secretly shocked by the Crown Prince's cultivation. The subordinates he brought were all spiritual cultivators level 7 and above, but they were like toys in the Crown Prince's hands. They didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Qi Lianhai's pupils contracted as he watched a stream of fire flash in front of him as fast as a gust of wind. Qi Lianhai shouted and activated his defensive barrier to block it. Unexpectedly, the Crown Prince's purple flame had an extremely strong impact. When it crashed into his chest, it was as if he had been struck by thousands of streaks of light, causing him to explode in pain. The defensive barrier simply couldn't withstand this flame and shattered on the spot. Qi Lianhai was also sent flying backward by this ferocious force. He crashed into the alley's wall behind him with a boom. How could that wall withstand this kind of force? It instantly shattered into pieces. Half of Qi Lianhai's body was buried in the ruins. He barely managed to prop himself up. His eyes were slightly frightened as he looked at the Crown Prince. This Crown Prince was actually able to insta-kill him, a grade 13 spirit master? Qi Lianhai hurriedly summoned his spirit beast, the spirit magpie, and struggled to jump onto the back of the spirit magpie. With a shout, he turned around and fled in panic. Roar! Unexpectedly, a dragon's roar came from the sky. Before Qi Lianhai could react, he felt an impact flying towards his face. How could he dodge in time? He was hit head-on in an instant. To be more precise, it was Little Seven's tail flick that sent it flying off the spirit magpie. As for the unlucky magpie, how could it dare to resist in front of the ancient golden dragon? It trembled for a long time before it was frightened by Shao Qi's roar. It folded its wings, closed its eyes, and fell to the ground with a thud, pretending to be dead. Little Seven circled around in the air. His body seemed to be covered in a layer of gold powder. Everywhere he went, there wasn't a lack of glittering gold folds. Qi Lianhai fell from the sky and landed headfirst on the ground with a potch sound. He landed headfirst on the broken mud wall of the small alley. His head was full of rubble and rubble. Xiaomu calmly swept him a glance before tilting her small head and humping. Serves you right. You dared to catch Jojo and even said that Jojo wouldn't have a good life in the future. You're the one who won't have a good life. From now on, you'll be unlucky every minute. Chapter 2219. Yes. Mo Lien nodded at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, then glanced at Arbor, who was leaning against her. The latter nodded in understanding and took out a puppet charm. Without another word, he inserted it between Qi Lianhai's eyebrows. Originally, with Arbor's current cultivation level, the puppet charm he made was ineffective against Qi Lianhai. However, Qi Lianhai was now under Mo Lien's control, so it couldn't be easier to make him fall for the charm. Qi Lianhai only felt pain in his conscience before he seemed to lose consciousness. His consciousness was completely blurred. What's your name? Arbor asked coldly. Qi Lianhai. Kneel. Qi Lianhai obediently knelt down and pressed his head against the ground in front of the two people, lying there piously. The dozen or so Prefecture disciples who were originally kneeling on the ground all shrank back in fright when they saw this. What was going on? Steward Qi actually knelt down so obediently? Tong led a group of people to surround them with swords raised. One of the men suddenly broke into a run and rushed toward an opening. This person's face was deathly pale with fright. While he was madly running for his life, Tong didn't even look at him. He directly raised his sword and pierced through his back, piercing through his heart. With a plop, that person fell to the ground. How could a 7th-rank spiritual master die so easily? Tong sneered and directly pierced through the back of that person's head with his sword. The person lying on the ground shuddered and screamed. This time, the sword pierced through his head, so he naturally couldn't be any more dead. One had to know that he originally wanted to play dead and look for a chance to escape. He didn't expect that playing dead would fail and that he would really become a corpse. When the others saw Qi Lianhai's pious and obedient appearance, they were all bewildered. They were very clear that the Crown Princess and Crown Prince definitely had some strange methods. However, their thoughts of escaping all disappeared without a trace when they saw their companions die tragically. Qi Lianhai. Arbor coldly called out his name. His small expressionless face was cold and indifferent. Do you know why I want you to go back? Qi Lianhai bowed his head and kowtowed to the ground, his face filled with a respectful expression. Arbor came to Qi Lianhai like a nimble cat and looked at him coldly. He leaned over and whispered, I want you to go back. Caretaker Hall. Ani Prefecture's prefecture lord's residence. Guan Yisong was stopped by 2 guards. Her pretty face was filled with anger and anger. I want to see my father. I want to see my father. 6th young mistress, I'm really sorry. The manor head is currently with Madame Hua. The manor head has ordered that no one is to disturb them. Guan Yisong's pretty face was flushed purple, and her eyes were misty. If you let me in, I'll take responsibility for anything that happens. I want to see my father. I want. The 2 guards impatiently extended their arms to stop Guan Yibo. 6th miss, please behave yourself. You. Guan Yisong pointed at the 2 snobbish guards and shouted hysterically, get out of the way. The 2 guards' faces darkened, and they blocked Guan Yisong with their crossed blades. 6th miss, please don't make things difficult for our subordinates. The manor head has ordered that no one is allowed to enter. My mother is about to die. I want my father to open the wonderful treasure tower and give me the blood coagulation pill to save my mother's life. One of the 2 guards couldn't help but snort. Aunt Jiang has always been weak and sickly. She uses pills above the profound grade to keep her life. Chapter 2220. When has she ever been well? That's right, 6th miss is overly worried. It's fine. Perhaps you'll find that Aunt Jiang has already recovered when you return. This time is different from the past. Mother's symptoms are very serious. Medicine Master Gu said that the blood coagulation pill can save my mother. The blood coagulation pill. Her body was pushed by the 2 guards, and she almost couldn't stand steadily as she fell down a few steps. 6th miss. If you continue to mess around like this, the 2 of us will also be punished along with you. Isn't that right? 6th miss, please go back. If there's anything you need, come early tomorrow. Guan Yisong charged up the steps as if she had gone mad. 2 streams of fire spirit rushed towards the 2 guards' chests. However, she was only a small first-rank spirit master. In front of 2 third-rank spirit master guards, she was clearly not enough. One of the guards looked at her mockingly and sneered. He reached out his hand and blocked her fire spirit. The thin stream of fire spirit energy that Guan Yisong released burned for less than 3 seconds in the guard's hand before slowly extinguishing. The guard crooked his mouth and laughed mockingly. 6th miss, you don't have to waste your energy with this little bit of spiritual power. You know you can't break through, so what are you trying to do? We don't want to fight you. If we hurt you, we won't be able to explain it to the manor head. Heh. The other guard chuckled. 6th young miss, please. Father. 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 I beg you to see your daughter. Father. Father. Guan Yisong charged up the steps with all her might. She was pushed down several more steps by the 2 guards. After a few more times, the guards were completely impatient. They didn't control their strength. One of them gave her a hard shove and threw her onto the stairs with all his might. Guan Yisong rolled twice on the steps. She reached out to steady herself. When she stood up, she saw that the door to the manor head's residence was wide open. Her father, Guan Zhaoting, was wearing an unbuttoned inner garment. He walked out with a young and plump woman in his arms. He stood high up on the steps and looked down at her coldly. Guan Yibo, what are you doing? The Hall of Care shouted coldly. The plump woman in Guan Zhaotong's arms twisted her waist and climbed onto Guan Zhaotong's chest. She smiled as she looked at Guan Yibo, whose hair was messed up after she fell on the stairs. What 6th young mistress? She looked worse than a dog. The woman glanced at Guan Yisong mockingly before shaking her body again. Then she snuggled into Guan Zhaotong's arms as if she had no bones. Father. Please bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother. Guan Yisong crawled to her feet and knelt on the ground. She crawled toward the stairs on all 4s. Father. Nonsense. Guan Zhaoting glared at his youngest daughter coldly. Do you know what the blood coagulation pill fruit is? Guan Zhaoting looked at his daughter coldly and sneered from the bottom of his heart. That is a god-tier pill. Deity level. There was only one in the entire Guan family. That's a life-saving medicine. How could you use it on your useless mother? Go back. Don't talk nonsense in the future. Father. Guan Yisong knelt on the ground and crawled up a few more steps. Father, I can give up everything. I only ask that you bestow the blood coagulation elixir fruit to save concubine mother's life. Heh. Guan Zhaotang sneered at her. Chapter 22-21. Who do you think you are? Is it your talented elder sister? What can a mere first-rank spirit master do for the family? Go back to your room and don't come out and embarrass yourself. Father! Guan Yisong screamed at the top of her lungs. Aya, sixth young mistress. You really don't know how to behave. Madame Hua twisted her slender waist and pointed at Guan Yisong. Master has been troubled by many things recently. As a daughter, it's fine if you don't share the family's burden, but why do you keep bothering him with small matters? Alright, sorry. Since you're still young, Master won't hold it against you. You should hurry back to your own court. Father. Guan Yisong climbed up a few steps, but was stopped by two guards again. Send sixth young mistress back. Guan Zhaotang flicked his sleeves and left with Madame Hua. He said coldly, no need to be polite. Throw her out. Sixth young mistress. Please. The two guards disrespected Guan Yisong even more after receiving the order. They pushed Guan Yisong down the stairs and looked down at her coldly. Tisich, a useless concubine mother who's been sick for a long time, still wants to use the blood coagulation pill? Dream on. Father, please save concubine mother's life. Father. Guan Yisong's eyes were filled with tears, and she could barely see the road clearly. Her gaze was fixed on Guan Zhaotang's departing figure, and her grief turned into deep hatred. Guan Zhaotang, you cruel and unscrupulous thing. If my mother hadn't led the entire Jiang family to support you and caused the Jiang family to fall apart, would you have the riches you have today? Guan Zhaotang, you're not human. Guan Zhaotang stopped in his tracks, turned his head abruptly and roared, Are you all dead? Shut her mouth and give her a good beating. It's the manor head. A few ferocious guards rushed out and dragged Guan Yisong away. They threw her down the stairs and began to beat her. Guan Yisong glared at her father, Guan Zhaoting, who was standing on the stairs. She laughed madly and said, Guan Zhaoting, you will get what you deserve. The entire Guan family will suffer retribution. You cruel and unscrupulous thing. You'll die a horrible death. Guan Yiba's mouth was gagged by a dirty rag. Then, a heavy stick landed on her body. After a few hits, she was covered in wounds and blood. Bower. A thin and weak servant girl walked over with a trembling woman who couldn't even walk properly. When the woman saw her daughter's situation, she let out a sorrowful cry. She struggled to let go of the young maid's hand. She didn't know where her divine strength came from, but she pounced over and hugged her daughter tightly. The few crazy guards didn't care and smashed their sticks straight at the mother and daughter. Guan Yiba shook her blood-soaked hair and flipped her body around. She tried her best to protect her mother and withstand the blows from the batons. Don't hit my bow. The woman tried her best to protect her daughter, but her cultivation was too low. In the end, she was still protected by Guan Yisong. Guan Zhaoting only looked coldly at the mother and daughter before leaving with his arm around Madame Hua's waist. He didn't care about the mother and daughter's pitiful cries. Guan Zhaoting had many children, and many of them were talented geniuses. He didn't care about a mediocre woman like Guan Yisong. Chapter 22-22. 7 days later, at the beginning of January, in the depths of winter, the entire Yi prefecture's capital was enveloped in a vast expanse of white cold air. On the bustling main street, an inconspicuous carriage with a black awning appeared. It followed the bustling main street and headed in the direction of the main mansion. When it passed the end of the main street, the curtain of the black awning carriage was gently lifted by a small white hand. Shui's gaze followed the endless stream of people and landed in front of a pharmacy. There were more than a dozen people watching the show there. They were pointing at a woman in thin clothes kneeling on the ground and whispering to each other. What's going on? This woman came before dawn. She wants to buy medicine on credit from Liangyuan Medicine Shop. It's a pity that the medicine shop isn't a charity hall. Shopkeeper, please give me a blood coagulation pill fruit. I can work for the medicine shop to pay off my debt. I can be an ox or a horse for the rest of my life. The woman knelt on the ground and took a few steps forward, calling out to the people in the shop. There were scars on her head and arms, and her face was very pale. It was as if she had been beaten up, and her body was covered in wounds. The medicine shop opened a small door, and an old shopkeeper in his 50s walked out. He sighed at her and said, "Miss, please go back. Our medicine shop doesn't need help at the moment." "Shopkeeper, I beg you to show some mercy. My mother is waiting for the medicine to save her life. My mother." "Miss, please don't force me. The blood coagulation pill fruit you mentioned is a divine-level medicine. Not to mention that our medicine shop doesn't have it at all. Even if you search the entire NE prefecture's capital, even the pill shop might not be able to find it. Moreover, the blood coagulation pill fruit is priceless. If our Liangyuan medicine shop has this divine medicine, it will naturally be the treasure of the shop. How can we give it to you so easily? Mississippi, please go back. Shopkeeper, please save my mother." The woman kowtowed heavily on the ground and sobbed. "I beg you, shopkeeper, I beg you." In the shop, a young master wearing a pure white fox fur coat slowly walked out. As soon as this person appeared in front of people, they felt that their eyes were shining. They only felt that he was graceful and elegant, and his peerless talent was indescribable. "Young master." The young master raised his hand slightly to stop the shopkeeper from speaking. He glanced at the girl and said coldly, "There's nothing here that you want. You don't have to kneel here and waste your time." The shopkeeper couldn't bear to see her like this. He sighed and glanced at her. "Miss, my family's young master is right. Instead of continuing to waste time here, why don't you hurry back? Perhaps you can still see your mother again." The person kneeling in front of Liangyuan medicine shop was naturally Guan Yiseng. At this moment, she raised her head. Her eyes were filled with tears as she looked at the handsome young man and then at the shopkeeper. Grief welled up in his heart, and he fell to the ground in a daze. Could it be that her mother was really going to leave her? From today onwards, she would be alone in this world, and she would have no more relatives. "Stop the car." The cold voice frightened the coachman. His arm trembled slightly, and he quickly pulled the reins to stop the horse. After a series of rustling sounds, a little girl wrapped in a fiery red cloak walked down from the carriage. She stood in the distance, and her gaze fell indifferently on Guan Yiseng. At some point in time, small pieces of snow had begun to fall. The little girl stared deeply at the woman kneeling on the ground through the thin layer of snow. Chapter 22-23. Mo Lien got out of the car and reached out to hold her cold little hand. He asked softly, "Jojo, what's wrong?" Arbor's gaze fell on the girl for a long time. It was so long that her mind was almost blank. It was so long that she felt like she was about to become a beautiful snow sculpture. It was as if she was the only one left in the entire world. She stood there helplessly. Fine snow fell coldly on her body, face, hair, and neck. Ripples seemed to appear in front of her eyes, floating slowly. It made her see the past, the past, the past, the past. That small figure was also like this, kneeling in front of the pharmacy, begging the shopkeeper to give her a stock of spirit medicine, begging him to go home with her to see her mother who was on the verge of death after giving birth. Back then, she was so small, so pitiful, so insignificant. She was like a speck of dust between heaven and earth. She was so weak that it made people's hearts tremble. She was so fragile that it made people scared. With one touch, the bubbles in front of her would all shatter into dust and be blown away by the wind. "Are you cold?" Mo Lien realized that there was something wrong with her emotions. He suddenly reached out and pulled her into his arms. He held her little hands and rubbed them gently. He exhaled a breath of hot air. "Are you feeling stuffy?" Arbor's dark eyes moved slightly in their sockets. Her gaze fell on Mo Lien's face. She reached out and touched his face with her cold little hands. "Are you cold?" He held her little hands tightly and blew on them. "No matter how cold it is, I can warm them up. Even if it's winter or frost, and all things wither." As long as I'm here, Jojo will never be afraid of the cold. Arbor laughed from the bottom of her heart. She pursed her lips and glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. How am I poor? Emolien reached out and hugged her. Do you want to get in the car? All right, Arbor said with a flick of his finger. 2 dots of light flew out and landed in Guan Yibao's palm. The young master's gaze fell deeply on her departing figure, and his left hand involuntarily clenched slightly. Actually, he had already noticed her from the moment she got out of the car. He watched as her gaze landed on Guan Yibao. He watched as the two of them shook hands as if no one else was around. He watched as they hugged and whispered their feelings to each other. She did not notice his presence at all. He watched as she turned around and left after giving him the medicine. She didn't even spare him a glance. It was as if Ding Yun did not exist in this world at all. Several shouts rose and fell from the crowd. While everyone's gazes fell on the medicine bottle in Guan Yibao's hand, only young Master Ding's gaze remained focused on the girl's slender figure as she was helped into the carriage. Young lady, this is the blood coagulation pill fruit. The shopkeeper excitedly pointed at the small, dark red fruit in Guan Yibao's hand and couldn't help but cry out in surprise. This is a gift from an expert? The shopkeeper hurriedly looked around. At this moment, everyone's gazes followed the shopkeeper's gaze and landed on the inconspicuous carriage with a black awning around the corner. Benefactor, please wait. Benefactor, please tell me your name. Yibao will repay you in the future. Guan Yibao excitedly chased a few steps forward. However, she only saw the corner of a red robe flash before her eyes. Chapter 22-24. The black canopied carriage quickly moved and sped away. The shopkeeper chased after them and stroked his beard as he looked at the blood coagulation pill in Guan Yibao's hand. He praised, as expected of a divine medicine. Miss, quickly put it in my jade box. Don't let its medicinal properties dissipate. Thank you, shopkeeper. Guan Yibao gratefully bowed to the shopkeeper and took a small jade box. She put the blood coagulation pill, which was still warm and had a trace of earthy smell, into the jade box. Miss, what kind of spirit medicine is in this small porcelain bottle? Can this old man take a look? Shopkeeper, please. Guan Yibao handed the bottle to the old shopkeeper, who reached out to take it with both hands. The shopkeeper uncorked the bottle, and everyone smelled a refreshing medicinal fragrance in the air. The shopkeeper's expression became serious. He hurriedly and carefully poured out a pill. As he examined it, he nodded and said, "This is a healing medicine that can heal both internal and external injuries. Take one orally and apply it to external injuries. It will form a scab and heal in a day." Although it is only a profound-grade medicinal pill, its effects are hundreds or even thousands of times better than normal profound-grade medicinal pills. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it is a sky-grade medicinal pill. Miss, quickly put it away and go home to treat your mother's injuries. The shopkeeper hurriedly put the medicine back into the bottle and urged her to leave. Guan Yibao nodded with a slightly excited expression. After thanking the shopkeeper, she hurriedly flew back home. This girl's luck is truly extraordinary. The shopkeeper nodded with a smile. When he turned around, he saw his young master's frosty gaze in the distance. He couldn't help but feel shocked. His young master was fine just now. Why is he like this now? Young Master Ding didn't say anything. He turned around and walked into the medicine shop. His slender figure seemed somewhat lonely and indifferent. The shopkeeper saw that his young master was in a bad mood, so he didn't dare to say anything. He hurriedly followed him in and took care of business. In the distance, the shopkeeper heard a muffled sound from the other side of the corridor. He was inwardly shocked. He could only faintly hear his young master let out a broken murmur. "Is he that good?" The shopkeeper didn't dare to ask any more questions. He just buried his head and ordered the workers to work. Inside the carriage, Arbor was half leaning against the window, holding his chin as he looked at the falling snow outside. One of his small hands slipped out and caught a sparkling snowflake outside. When she retracted her hand, the snowflake melted into a sparkling and translucent six-chested ice crystal. "All right, stop playing. Come and have some hot tea. Mo Lien looked at her helplessly. He pulled her into his arms and gave her a cup of tea with a moderate temperature. Jojo, did you remember your bad nightmare just now? Arbor held the warm teacup and nodded slowly. At that time, I really wanted a benefactor to appear in my life and give me a hand. Unfortunately, until the day he died, he still had nothing. Mo Lien looked at her deeply and smiled. I don't need it now. Our future is in our hands, isn't it? Yes. Xiao Mu placed her small, warm hand on his face and said with a wink, Mo Lien, when I said that I liked you that day, it was from the bottom of my heart, from the bottom of my heart. I definitely wasn't lying. I know. Mo Lien chuckled. He reached out and gently pulled her little hand away. He pressed it to his lips and kissed it slowly. Jojo, I like you too. Chapter 22-25. Song Prefecture, Phoenix Emperor City. Snowflakes fluttered down like goose feathers. Inside the spacious and deserted Taiji Palace, Duan Yu was dressed plainly as he leaned against the window for a long time. His gaze was fixed on the distant horizon, and no one knew what he was thinking about. The junior eunuch who was accompanying him quickly entered, but he was slightly startled. Your Highness, you've been standing by the window in the wind for nearly 2 hours. The junior eunuch quickly said, How about having Xiao Kezi serve your meal? Duan Yu faintly glanced at him and waved his hand. I'm not hungry. Don't be busy. Withdraw. He only wanted to quietly be alone for a while. The junior eunuch quickly said, Your Highness, you haven't eaten any tea or rice for most of the day. Do you have any requests? Feel free to instruct Xiao Kezi. Duan Yu was fed up with his nagging and turned to retreat from the window to the table. All right, bring some tea over. Your Highness, why are you so long-winded? Duan Yu irritably glared at him. With my cultivation, I won't starve to death even if I don't eat a single grain of rice for half a month, right? What are you worrying about? Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and pitifully retreated. Before he could retreat out of the hall, he saw a dignified and solemn maidservant jogging inside. That maidservant glanced at Xiao Kezi from the corner of her eye, but she didn't ask anything when she saw his listless appearance. She then bowed and saluted, Your Highness, the list for the winter hunt has been announced, and Your Highness also needs to accompany His Highness. There are less than 20 days left before the departure date, so everything needs to be prepared quickly. Xiao Kezi pursed his lips and rolled his eyes. Anti-Yuan Zhen, with His Highness cultivation, what doesn't he have in his inner world? What does he need to prepare? The maidservant fiercely glared at Xiao Kezi. Nonsense. How can you speak to His Highness like that? Duan Yu looked up at that junior eunuch who was pursing his lips and couldn't help but chuckle. He threw down the book in his hand and said, all right, go prepare the meal. This punk was quite gutsy to even dare to tease master. Lilt Kuzi giggled and hurriedly responded. He got up and ran out to find someone to serve the meal. Your Highness, it's still quite far away from the winter hunt. Yuan Zhen bowed his head and said, now that midwinter has arrived, there is a lot of snow and rain, and the road is not easy to travel. There are not many considerate people around His Highness. This servant will draw up a list of names for the trip tomorrow. Your Highness can see who you like to bring, or who you need to add. All right, there's no need to trouble yourself. Duan Yu waved his hand disinterestedly and shook his head. Just you and Xiao Kuzi will be fine. That won't do. Yuan Zhen said with disapproval, since Your Highness doesn't care about this matter, then this servant will make the decision on the manpower. If you're going out, you should at least bring more guards and servants with you. Duan Yu couldn't even listen to Yuan Zhen's rambling. He merely propped up his chin with one hand as he gazed at the balls of snow outside the window, his gaze slightly dazed. How long will it snow in Sangzhou? Duan Yu raved. Auntie Yuan Zhen couldn't help but be startled. She turned to look outside the window and said softly, it snows heavily in Sangzhou for 7 to 8 days every time. It really is quite long. When I was on Sikong planet, I heard about it before. The Divine Province's Phoenix Wood, Sangzhou's Snowfield Flower, and Underworld Province's remote ghost grass grow in the hottest, coldest, and most poisonous places respectively. Chapter 22-26. According to legend, gathering these 3 divine herbs and adding a sacred rank spirit fruit, the bloodshed vermilion fruit, can create a soul-returning pill that reverses yin and yang. Duan Yu propped up his chin with one hand and looked up at Yuan Zhen. Is that true? Yuan Zhen was taken aback and pondered for a few seconds before replying, I have indeed heard of these herbs, but it's only been a legend after so many years. This prince heard that the place we're going to hunt this time is an extremely cold place, the heavenly ice and snow region. If we can find that snowfield divine flower while we're at it, then everything will be perfect. Yuan Zhen couldn't help but sigh when he saw his master's distracted appearance. This servant heard that the snowfield divine flower only grows in extremely cold places. It's fine to touch it once in a while, but after repeated touches, it will open all of its petals and spit out all of the icicles inside. It will envelop a person and devour their bones without leaving a trace. Therefore, it's extremely difficult to pluck the snowfield divine flower. Moreover, this kind of divine herb has always been a fantastic story passed down by word of mouth. In reality, no one has ever obtained it before. Duan Yu exhaled softly and muttered with a spurious smile, it's really too similar. A body full of icicles that can take a person's life without warning. As he spoke, Duan Yu seemed to have thought of something and chuckled to himself. Yuan Zhen didn't understand what His Highness was saying, but his gaze lingered on him for a moment. Seeing that Duan Yu didn't say anything else, he bowed and slowly retreated. The sky had already completely darkened. Inside Taiji Palace, there were various kinds of candlesticks and palace lanterns that illuminated the entire palace pavilion under the night sky. Green tiles and vermilion buildings, exquisite jade pavilions. Layer upon layer, arranged in picturesque disorder. The lit palace lanterns were set off by the winter lake's setting sun. The curtain of night was reflected on the pavilions, and the dark sky was like a painting. Mai Qiao's section break Yo, Ani Prefecture's prefecture lord's residence, after dismissing the clingy Madame Hua, Ani Prefecture's prefecture lord, Guan Zhaoying, sat in the main hall with a gloomy expression. He coldly gazed at the middle-aged man kneeling in front of him with his head bowed. Why aren't you speaking? This subordinate has failed in his task. Please punish me, my lord. Guan Zhaoying glanced at him coldly. Forget it. I've underestimated my opponent this time. Get up first. Thank you, Mannerhead. Qi Lianhai lowered his head and stood up. I recently obtained a spirit breakthrough pill that can increase my cultivation. Guan Zhaotang flipped his hand and took out a porcelain bottle from his inner world. With a face full of joy, he said, let's put the previous matters aside for now. We'll talk about it again when I become a level 14 spirit master. Congratulations, Mannerhead. Qi Lianhai congratulated him expressionlessly. Unfortunately, Guan Zhaotang was so immersed in his own joy that he didn't notice anything wrong with Qi Lianhai's expression. You stand guard outside. Yes. Qi Lianhai walked out and reached out to close the door. He turned his head and looked coldly at Guan Zhaotang through the shadowy door and window. At the same time, in the courtyard of Ani Prefecture, Guan Yibo ran back excitedly and hurriedly helped her dying mother up from the bed. While instructing a servant girl to support her mother, she took out a small dark red fruit from her inner world. Guan Yibo's eyes were filled with excitement. She hurriedly reached out and stuffed the fruit into Aunt Zhang's mouth. Mother, quickly swallow it, mother. Guan Yibo hurriedly shouted in her heart. Chapter 22-27. In just a few moments, concubine Jiang, who was on the brink of death, felt much better. Even her heartbeat became stronger. Seeing this, Guan Yisong laughed from the bottom of her heart. She hugged her mother tightly and cried, Mother, mother, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, mother. Concubine Jiang slowly woke up. When she saw her daughter's face in front of her, she couldn't help but be slightly shocked. She almost cried out immediately, Oh, my poor child, are we mother and daughter both already dead? Don't speak nonsense, mother. Guan Yisong hastily patted her hand, a hint of a smile in her eyes. Are you feeling better now? I'll help you apply some medicine to your wounds. You'll recover soon. Concubine Jiang couldn't help but reveal a pleasantly surprised expression. I do feel much better now. Oh, what medicine did you give mother? It's the blood coagulation pill. What? Concubine Jiang couldn't help but be shocked. She hurriedly grabbed Guan Yiba's arm and asked, Bao, don't do anything stupid. Don't steal the divine medicine from the strange treasure pavilion for my illness. Guan Yisong quickly said, Mother, don't worry about it. This medicine has nothing to do with the Tower of Wonders, Guan Yisong said coldly. When she thought about how cruel Guan Zhaodeng had been to her, she couldn't help but laugh. We have nothing to say to the Guan family in the future. Before concubine Jiang could ask her daughter what had happened, she saw Guan Yisong stand up. She quickly moved to the door and pressed her hand on the windowsill. She looked outside cautiously. What's wrong? I think there's a fire outside. Guan Yisong's eyes were slightly suspicious. She moved closer to the window and looked outside a few more times. When she looked, she saw that there was indeed a raging fire in the direction of the Tower of Wonders. Guan Yisong didn't have the slightest sympathy. She looked outside for a long time before retracting her gaze and walking quickly to her mother. Mother, it's not peaceful outside. Let's turn off the lights and sleep. No matter what happens later, don't get up. The young maidservant serving concubine Jiang was so scared that she was trembling. Guan Yisong didn't have the time to care about the servant girl's feelings. She waved her hand and extinguished the lights in the room. The master and servant found a place to rest. However, in this small room, the bed under her mother was the only bed. The servant girl was curled up on the edge of the bed. Guan Yisong's eyes closed. In the latter half of the night, the entire Guan family was in an uproar as if they had been ignited by firecrackers. The footsteps of people coming and going could be heard from both inside and outside, and the sound spread all the way to their courtyard. Bang, bang, bang. Someone knocked on the door. Bam Guan Yisong's heart. He got up and opened the door. The door creaked, and it sounded particularly ear-piercing in the silent night. The housekeeper frowned and looked at her from head to toe. Her gaze paused on Guan Yiba's bruised arm. Where is concubine Jiang? What else do you want? Guan Yisong asked coldly. Concubine Jiang just fell asleep. Do you want a dying patient to wake up and greet her? The housekeeper raised the candlestick in his hand and shone it into the room. Chapter 22-28. She saw concubine Jiang wrapped in a thin blanket, only revealing half of her pale and bloodless face. Umph, the steward snorted heavily, his eyebrows arched as he rudely said, A thief broke into the Tower of Wonders just now. If sixth young miss discovers anything amiss, remember to report it immediately. Don't act alone. The thief's cultivation is quite high this time. Guan Yisong coldly looked at the snobbish steward and didn't say a word to him. When the steward turned around, Guan Yisong unceremoniously slammed the door shut with a bang. The steward was so angry that he turned around and glared at the door. He had the urge to smash it open again. An unfavored sixth young miss dared to throw a tantrum in front of him. She must be tired of living. She'll suffer in the future. Steward who, where do you think we should go now? Go back. Steward who angrily scolded, Go back to the Tower of Wonders. Steward. As soon as he said that, he heard a panic-stricken cry coming from the winding path. Soon, an Ani Prefecture's servant hurriedly arrived in front of Chief Steward who almost fell to the ground with a grunt. Steward, it's bad. You're the one who's in trouble. Steward who angrily kicked the servant. If you have something to say it quickly. Don't talk nonsense all day long. The servant's waist hurt from the kick, but he didn't dare to resist. He hurriedly nodded and bowed. Steward who, you had this lowly one take the guards to inventory the items in the Tower of Wonders. Our subordinates have discovered something. Above the third floor of the strange treasure tower, everything was there. It's all gone. What? Most of the items stored on the third floor up were mystic grade and above treasures. Forging materials, medicinal pills, all kinds of spirit tools and treasures, spiritual techniques, and cultivation methods. Basically, all of the Guan family's wealth was there. Steward who jumped up and hurriedly rushed in the direction of the Tower of Wonders. As he ran, he cursed loudly, Didn't I tell you to stay there and watch? What's going on? Have you informed the manor head? Guan Yibo listened as the sounds from the small courtyard grew further and further away. After a long while, she opened the door again and looked coldly at the lonely and dilapidated courtyard. Concubine Jiang was now able to get out of bed. She hurriedly got off the bed and went to Guan Yibo's side. She grabbed her arm and asked, "Bao, what happened?" Something really happened to the strange treasure tower. Guan Yisong couldn't help but sneer in her heart. Just now, she deliberately did not use the healing medicine to show the wound on her arm to Chief Hu. It was not a peaceful day in the Guan family. It seemed that someone had sneaked into the strange treasure tower. If the injuries on his body disappeared at this moment, he would definitely become the focus of Supervisor Hu's investigation. Mother. Guan Yisong quickly walked to the bedside and looked at the scars on her body. She hurriedly said, "I won't remove these for now. Something happened to the Guan family, but that has nothing to do with us." Guan Yisong sneered and said, "We just need to remember to try our best not to get into trouble." At the same time, Xiao Mu, who had put on an invisibility talisman and was holding Mo Lian's hand, ostentatiously wandered around the lofty treasures pavilion, suddenly came to a halt. "I'm so sleepy. I need to catch up on my sleep." Chapter 22-29. Jojo? Mo Lian leaned close to her and asked in a low voice, "What did you see?" Arbor raised his small hand and covered his mouth. He whispered, "Keep your voice down." Mo Lian blinked and pulled her hand away from his mouth. He held it in his hand and whispered, "Let's call this a thief." Xiao Mu nodded and dragged her husband upstairs for a stroll. At this time, the fire outside the building was already burning fiercely. There were dozens of people inside and outside the building. Some were putting out the fire, and some were saving things. It was very noisy. A servant with a drooping old face ran in from the outside crying. He slapped his thigh and wailed, "It's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over, it's over." Looking at the emptiness of the second floor, the old servant collapsed to the ground. "Oh, my mother! This great bandit was truly hateful. They actually emptied the entire floor. This damned thief. But how am I supposed to explain this? Chief Hu, what do we do now, Chief Hu?" "Scram. Hurry up and report to the manor head. What are you guys still doing here?" "Scram." Head steward who kicked the manservant's buttocks twice and told them to hurry out and report to the manor head. But at this critical juncture, if he really went to report to the manor head, he would only be waiting for death. None of the servants were truly stupid. None of them moved when they heard her words. They all pretended to fall to the ground and groaned. Head steward who was so angry that he was about to ascend to the heavens. He forcefully stepped on a manservant's foot and said, "Quickly go and inform the manor head." Arbor was standing beside the servant. Just as he was about to walk over, Mo Lian reached out and pulled him to her side, giving him a comforting rub. "Don't go there," he whispered in her ear. His voice seemed to float on her face, bringing with it a warm breath, as if there was a trace of electric current flowing through her body. Xiao Mu's petite body was turned around by him, and she inexplicably felt that her face was a bit hot. She raised her petite hand and pressed it against his chin, forcefully pushing away his handsome face that was closing in on her. "Why are you pushing me?" He couldn't help but chuckle. The more she pushed him, the closer this guy got to her. He pulled her into his arms and hugged her tightly. The little fellow angrily reached out a small paw from his chest and pulled his hair. "Don't mess around." Mo Lian pulled her hand down and pinched it. She laughed softly and said, "You won't be pretty if you pull your husband bald." Arbor's mouth twitched. He moved his little body in his arms. "Keep your voice down. They're about to discover us." "So what if they discover us?" Mo Lian said nonchalantly. "You wanted to walk over just now." Arbor snorted. She looked at the butler's ugly face and really wanted to go over and kick him. "If you kick him, we'll be exposed." He used his finger to lift a strand of hair by her ear and laughed in a low voice. "Chio said that there's something strange about this place. Do you want all our efforts to go to waste?" This guy was so annoying today. Why did she feel that Jojo's face was steaming? Arbor huffed and rubbed against his chest. "If you continue to make a fuss, I'll throw you to Paradise Planet." Prince Mo blinked pitifully and whispered in her ear, "Jojo, are you really going to throw me away?" Arbor! Exclamation point. This peerless demon was so annoying. Chapter 2230. Mo Lien held back her laughter and pulled her to the side to avoid the noisy crowd of an Prefecture's people. At this moment, the strange treasure tower was bustling with people coming and going. The two of them were talking in a low voice while hiding from others, so they naturally wouldn't attract anyone's attention. "Manager Hu, we've checked the floors upstairs. They're all empty. Aside from the first floor, the top 5 floors have all been emptied, Manager Hu." Arbor felt a little funny when she saw a group of people coming and going like headless flies. When she looked up at Mo Lien, Crown Prince Mo was currently gazing down at her with a grin. He leaned close to her ear and whispered, "The old man will definitely personally invite the caretaker hall later. We just have to wait." Sure enough, Manager Hu dawdled for a while before he couldn't hold himself back and ran out. He hurriedly rushed to Shuntian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord's residence to report the situation. Manager Hu had just arrived at the Prefecture Lord's residence, but before he could send someone in to report, he heard a woman's shrill cry for help from inside. Madame Hua ran out of the bedroom with her hair disheveled and her clothes disheveled. She screamed, "Someone come! Someone come! Someone come!" Manager Hu and a few Imperial bodyguards went forward at the same time and hastily stopped the madly screaming Madame Hua. "Madam, what's going on?" Madame Hua said with a frightened expression, "Quick, quick! Prefecture Lord!" Bang! The door to the Prefecture Lord's bedroom was suddenly kicked open from the inside. The door was wide open, and a figure stumbled out from inside. He held his head and howled a few times. "Prefecture? Prefecture Lord!" Manager Hu's eyes were sharp. He immediately saw the person who rushed out from inside and was covered in blood. It was Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Guan Zhao. Guan Zhaotang was currently in a very sorry state. Not only was he covered in blood, but his eyes also seemed to have been pierced by something sharp. His eyes were bloodshot. His hair was disheveled as he howled like a madman. He held onto the wall with one hand and stumbled everywhere. A few Imperial bodyguards were so frightened that they retreated a few steps, not daring to go forward to help him. Guan Zhaotang clasped his hands together, and the spiritual energy in his body rushed out like a tsunami. The surging spiritual power sent several guards flying, one by one, to the ground, vomiting blood and fainting. Guan Zhaotang's eyes were filled with blood and he could no longer see. He supported his head with one hand and looked at Chief Hu with a twisted expression. Chief Hu was so frightened that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. Although she knew that Guan Zhaotang couldn't see her at all, she still felt very scared when those bloodshot eyes stared straight at her. Manor Lord, how are you?" How could Director Hu know what had happened? He resisted the numbness in his scalp and reached out to support Guan Zhaotang with trembling hands. Guan Zhaotang roared angrily. He shook off Chief Hu's arm forcefully and roared into the sky. "I'll kill you! I'll kill you! Manor Head! Manor Head!" Chief Steward Hu looked in the direction that Guan Zhaotang was pointing at. Moments later, quick! Chief Hu urged a row of Imperial bodyguards who had rushed over to search the Prefecture Lord's room. Soon, the Imperial bodyguards carried out a lifeless corpse from the room. Chief Hu took a look and couldn't help but be shocked. Wasn't this Qi Lianhai? Chief Hu braced himself and trembled with fear as he said, "Manor Head, Bao Qi Lu was stolen." Make up for yesterday's 2 chapters. Chapter 2231. A quarter of an hour ago, Ani Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Guan Zhaotang, was in his residence, seizing the time to break through to level 14. But at the critical moment of his cultivation, he was bitten by the watchdog that he had raised himself. Guan Zhaotang really didn't expect that Qi Lianhai would stab him in the back. That stab didn't hit his vital parts, and Qi Lianhai's blade was even flung away by the cyclone around him. However, due to this shock, his spiritual aura suddenly diverged in his body. Guan Zhaotang was unlucky enough to enter Qi deviation. His spiritual aura was in a mess, and his 7 orifices were bleeding at the same time. Just as he was struggling with all his might, desperately trying to suppress the chaotic spiritual energy, that damnable Qi Lianhai actually stabbed him in the back again. When Guan Zhaotang turned around, he felt 2 cold lights fly into his eyes. He subconsciously roared and struck out several palms in the dark. One of his palms landed on Qi Lianhai's body and sent him flying. Guan Zhaotang couldn't see with his eyes, but he could still use his spiritual sense. Therefore, he flew over and killed Qi Lianhai with a single sword strike without saying a word. At this moment, Guan Zhaotang's eyes were blurred with blood. He was secretly anxious and suspected that his eyes were most likely going to be ruined. Head steward, who was trembling with fear as he braced himself and said, "Manor Lord, Baoqi Lu was stolen." Guan Zhaotang was so angry that he immediately shook Manager Hu out. He turned around with disheveled hair and glared at Manager Hu with bloodshot eyes. Head steward, who was shocked. It took him a Herculean effort to get up from the ground. He scrambled to the foot of the Hall of Care and cried out in a tearful voice, "Manor Lord, there's something fishy about this matter. We've searched the outside of Treasure House several times, but we didn't even find a ghost. However, everything in the strange treasure tower has actually disappeared without a trace." Guan Zhaotang kicked Manager Hu's back, causing him to roll on the ground. Guan Zhaotang was both anxious and angry. He strode forward a few steps before suddenly stopping. His figure quickly retreated to Qi Lianhai's side. Guan Zhaotang picked up Qi Lianhai and used his spiritual sense to examine Qi Lianhai's body. If he didn't look, he wouldn't have known, but the moment he did, his body trembled violently for a moment. It turned out that Qi Lianhai's body had already been corroded by the poison and was decaying. No wonder he didn't have the slightest strength to resist after being hit by his palms. Who was controlling Qi Lianhai from behind? Manor Lord. Chief Steward, who called out to him while trembling with fear. "Old Master, are you all right? You really scared me to death just now." Madame Hua originally wanted to come forward and comfort Zhao Tang at this time. Unexpectedly, Guan Zhaotang was not in the mood to tease her. He pushed Madame Hua to the ground and did not even look at her. Guan Zhaotang led Chief Hu and the others to the Tower of Strange Treasures. He turned a deaf ear to Madame Hua's repeated calls of Master Ch behind him. Guan Zhaotang looked back and forth with a twisted expression. He then hurried to the entrance of the Tower of Strange Treasures with Chief Hu and the others. Chief Hu looked up and saw that the Tower of Strange Treasures had turned black. He secretly glanced at his master, Guan Zhaotang, in shock and fear. Guan Zhaotang didn't say much to him and directly walked into the Tower of Strange Treasures. Guan Zhaotang's spiritual power was exhausted by using his spiritual sense to check the place. Chapter 2232. Moreover, when he was running back from the spiritual energy fork, he had been trying his best to suppress the scattered spiritual energy in his body. Now that he finally managed to suppress the spiritual energy, he was almost at his limit. Guan Zhaotang was now full of thoughts about his Strange Treasures Tower. He didn't even have time to sit down and regulate his breath before he directly ran to the second floor of the Strange Treasures Tower. When he reached the second floor and looked at the empty floor, Guan Zhaotang's heart sank. Then he went to the third floor, the fourth floor, the fifth floor, and the sixth floor. Except for the first floor that originally didn't have anything, he could still see a few mystic energy beads and the like on the shelves. The other floors from the second floor to the sixth floor were all visited by the thief. He even stole the 100 treasure compartments that were used to store items. Guan Zhaotang roared sorrowfully. Because he used too much strength, his eyes began to bleed again. Manager Hu didn't even dare to fart. He shrank to the side and timidly followed Guan Zhaotang more than 10 steps away. Guan Zhaotang suddenly thought of something and quickly ran to the sixth floor. Manager Hu led a few bodyguards to follow him all the way to the sixth floor. Because they ran too fast, they all appeared to be a little out of breath. Guan Zhaotang went straight to the center of the empty sixth floor. The ring on his left hand suddenly lit up. Arbor, who had followed them all the way up, couldn't help but feel a little excited. He subconsciously held Emolien's hand. Finally, she didn't waste her time waiting here for this old guy. He's finally here. He finally came to open the secret room in the Strange Treasures Tower. Arbor's eyes lit up as he watched Guan Zhaotong's every move from afar. When he saw a beam of light fall on Guan Zhaotong's body in the middle, the beam enveloped Guan Zhaotong and floated up. Arbor quickly pulled Emolien's hand. The young couple hurriedly jumped into the beam of light. At the same time, they felt their bodies being pulled up slowly by a suction force. Guan Zhaotong's eyelids suddenly trembled, but on the surface he continued to be pulled up by the beam of light. Arbor and Emolien held hands and were pulled to the 7th floor by the light beam. The two of them looked at each other and understood. From the outside, one would not be able to tell that there were 7 floors. But in fact, this hidden floor was very well concealed by the array glyphs. Arbor and Emolien had just stood on the 7th floor of Bao Qi Lu. Before they could even take a step forward, they heard the sound of locks being locked. Xiao Mu surveyed her surroundings and saw rows of iron bars descending from the 4 walls, trapping her and Emolien on the spot on the 7th floor. The two of them immediately appeared in front of the care hall. Arbor sized him up and sneered, "You're quite sharp." At this time, Guan Zhaotong was trembling with anger. Through his soul sense, he could vaguely see Arbor's appearance and expression. Guan Zhaotong anxiously shouted, Who are you? You've already sent your most trusted subordinate to kidnap me, yet you don't know who I am?" Xiao Mu scoffed as she sized up the caretaker hall. "It's you." Guan Zhaotong immediately reacted. "Arbor?" He really didn't expect Miss Qiao to be so bold as to directly barge into his lair. "Qi Lian Hai became like that because of you, which?" Guan Zhaotong asked angrily. Chapter 2233. Arbor looked at him coldly. The 7th floor of the Tower of Strange Treasures was very empty. Only a crooked old tree was planted in the middle, and it looked half dead. So what if I'm not? What's the point of asking this now? Guan Zhaotong looked like a lamp that had run out of oil. Arbor was too lazy to talk to him. She took out her ruler and injected spiritual energy into it. Then she waved a line of fire at Guan Zhaotong. "When you sent people to kidnap me, you should have thought that there are some people you can't touch as you wish." Bang! A transparent defensive boundary rose in front of Guan Zhaotong and blocked all of Arbor's attacks. Arbor frowned and looked over. It was strange that the spiritual energy she injected into the boundary disappeared without a trace. After the line of fire was sent out, it should have been able to break through the defensive barrier, but it actually disappeared. Guan Zhaotong's sneer suddenly turned into a wild laugh. "Do you think you can touch me on the 7th floor of the Tower of Strange Treasures? Little girl, you're still too naive." Guan Zhaotong walked to the old tree in the middle with a cold expression. He looked up and pointed at the tree behind him. "Do you see this? I asked someone to plant this shielding tree here. Usually, its aura is hidden by the talisman array, so it won't affect people. But now, don't you feel panic and fear? Do you feel that your spiritual power and spiritual sense have disappeared?" Guan Zhaotong sneered at the two of them mockingly. "Your time of death is coming soon. The shielding tree doesn't just block people's spiritual sense." Arbor was curious. She thought of the trees in Dai Zong Mountain in Poland Prefecture that blocked people's spiritual sense. Then she looked at the crooked old tree in front of her. "Does it look like this? Ordinary shielding trees can only block people's spiritual sense. But the tree I transplanted is different." Guan Zhaotong laughed wildly. The blood vessels in his eyes fell again, and his face was distorted. "Ha! Are you afraid?" Guan Zhaotong sneered. "If you're afraid, you can kneel and beg me." Arbor looked at him expressionlessly. The next moment, his fingertips moved, and dozens of explosion talismans flew out, encircling the Hall of Care. "What are you doing?" Guan Zhaotong's expression changed. "Talisman? Why did so many talismans fly out when this little girl attacked? Are you an idiot?" Arbor glanced at him coldly and didn't say anything else. He gestured with his hand and had dozens of explosion talismans fly in front of him. Boom, 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 boom. A series of explosions shook the entire floor of the strange treasure building. The entire building was shaking. The guards on the lower floors all ran downstairs in shock, not knowing what was going on. Cough, cough, cough. Guan Zhaoting pressed his chest and took a few steps back. His face was slightly pale as he stared at the two indistinct figures in front of him. Right now, his own spiritual conscience had also been blocked, so he could only see Qiao Mu and Mo Lian's swaying figures when he looked at them. Qiao Mu curled her lips as she gazed at the man who had revealed himself after breaking open the defensive boundary. She gave him a mocking look. Chapter 2234. A shielding tree is useless against me. She was a talisman practitioner, all right? Even if her cultivation was shielded, she still had plenty of talismans to deal with Guan Zhao. Who was the naive one here? Mo Lian didn't make a move from beginning to end. She only stood on the side and watched his Jojo with a grin. Arbor's aloof face was expressionless as she coldly gazed at Guan Zhao. You were the one who gave the order to snatch the sacred water from the holy water sect, right? It was your decision. Arbor stared deeply at Guan Zhao, and a wave of coldness flashed through her eyes. It was as long as Guan Zhaotang admitted it, the abyss of hell would open its huge mouth and swallow him up in the next second. Guan Zhaotang was inexplicably alarmed. He only felt that when the little girl's pitch-black eyes stared at him, there was an inexplicably terrifying presence. Her eyes, which were like two ice pearls, seemed to carry an endless baleful aura. Guan Zhaotang inexplicably started to explain himself. I've also heard about Planet Sikong's holy water sect. This matter was entirely because Hong Jinchuan coveted the sacred water and provoked it himself. Guan Zhaotang was also furious when he mentioned this. Hong Jinchuan actually concealed such an important matter like the sacred water's appearance and didn't report it. Did he think that he could snatch another sect's treasure with the few people he had? If Hong Jinchuan hadn't acted on his own initiative, perhaps the sacred water would have already fallen into Guan Zhaotang's hands by now. His cultivation realm might have already broken through to the god realm. One talisman after another floated in Arbor's hand. Of course, you can deny it. I don't need you to admit it. Arbor's gaze hardened. 10, 20, 30. Countless five-spirit talismans fluttered around her. Guan Zhaotang's expression changed drastically. What are you doing? Heavens! These five-spirit talismans, what did it feel like to have hundreds of five-spirit talismans explode at the same time? Guan Zhaotang instantly comprehended. Following a huge explosion, manager who was originally blocked outside the iron fence, was sent flying by the explosion and tumbled down the stairs. Head steward whose head was facing down, and he almost twisted his neck. When he got up and looked again, he saw that the entire building had collapsed. Crushed stones and dust rolled toward him. Choking on the dust in his mouth, Chief Hu could not help but cough violently. When he raised his head, he couldn't help but look in front of him in shock. A huge, crooked old tree appeared in front of everyone, as if it had grown out of thin air. The tree's roots were intertwined, and its canopy was very large. It was so dense that it seemed to be protruding from the center of the building. A young girl in plain clothes was standing under this ancient tree, looking up at the sky. It didn't matter if he didn't look, but when Chief Hu looked up, he was so scared that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He saw a person hanging upside down from the old tree. Both of his hands were bound by the spirit-binding rope, and he was struggling with all his might. Who else could it be but Guan Zhaotang? The guards of Ani Prefecture had long been scared witless and fled after hearing the news. Chief Hu also hurriedly crawled out, only wanting to get as far away from this place as possible. He felt that if he continued to stay here, there might be more unlucky things waiting for him here. Arbor's eyes lit up as she stared at the old tree standing in front of her. Qiu, why is this tree so strange? Chapter 2235. She had released so many five-spirit talismans just now, causing the entire building, oh no, the ground to collapse. But this tree was actually safe and sound. She didn't believe that there was nothing strange about it. Master, I can't tell what's wrong with this tree either. But since it can block spiritual sense and spiritual energy, then let's leave it here. If we plant it on Paradise Planet, won't it affect the spirit domain? It won't. Chiochio had "I'm the boss, if it dares to act rashly" tone. It snorted and said, "If it dares to mess around, I'll eat it." Arbor thought that its seed fragments were very powerful and naturally believed that it wasn't boasting when it said that it would eat this shielding tree. "All right then, you can transplant it in." Arbor nodded and said, although she didn't know what use this strange shielding tree had for her, since Chiochio wanted to plant it on Paradise Planet, it should have its reasons. Arbor still didn't know that this shielding tree would help her greatly in the future. Right now, the little fellow was picking up everything as though it was picking up trash. It even instructed Chiochio to throw this tree further away so that it wouldn't affect the peach tree. "Our old shielding tree is called the shielding tree. It told me just now that it's called the essence concealing tree." Chiochio's tone was slightly helpless. "Master, this essence concealing tree can grow. If our spirit domain transforms into a god domain in the future, maybe the essence concealing tree can also block other people's divine power and spiritual consciousness." "Arbor? What use was that?" Seeing that she didn't understand, Chiochio couldn't help but cough lightly and continue, "Master, you still don't understand. If we plant such a essence concealing tree in our sect in the future, other people won't have any spiritual energy if they attack our sect. What's the point of fighting?" Arbor couldn't help but snicker. "Are you joking? If you plant this lousy tree in the sect, then won't Senior Sister and the others still live? Aren't their spiritual energy and spiritual consciousness also blocked?" "Chiochio." Heavens, little Master was too stupid. Chiochio's saliva was about to dry up from explaining. Master. Since it's in our hands, it naturally has to listen to Chiochio's orders. If I tell it to block it, it will block it. If I don't tell it to block it, will it dare to?" Arbor finally understood, and his eyes could not help but light up slightly. He stretched out his hand and summoned the little tray ant from Paradise Planet. Holding it in his hand, he looked at it with a pleasant expression and said, "In that case, if this tree is placed in the sect in the future, it can be used as a divine guardian tree?" Chiochio nodded heavily. "When the time comes, we only need to break off half of its main branch and transplant it. Once it's fully grown, it'll definitely be able to shield everything within 100 kilometers. Then how do we make it recognize friend and foe?" Arbor asked suspiciously. "Actually, it's quite simple. As long as you cut off a small piece of its stem, boil it in water, and drink a small cup of it, you'll be able to make the essence concealing tree treat you as one of us within a month." "Drinking a cup every month is that simple?" "It's that simple." Arbor nodded happily. "That's great. Hurry and move it away." Chiochio danced and shook in her palm before jumping down from her fingers. Its entire slender little body emitted bits of green light. It didn't take much effort at all. In just a short moment, the entire heavy crooked tree began to tremble. Whoosh! Chapter 2236. After a burst of green light flashed, the entire old tree was sucked into Paradise Planet by Chiochio. All that was left was, With a furious cry, Guan Zhaoteng fell from the tree that had suddenly disappeared and landed heavily on the ground with his head facing down. Guan Zhaoteng was truly a little dazed from the fall. His head knocked heavily on the ground, instantly leaving a bloody mark. He roared as he raised his head, his entire person in a very sorry state. His eyes, which were already severely injured, were now bleeding profusely. Arbor didn't care about Guan Zhaoteng's roar at all. Her line of sight fell on a tree pit in front of her. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that it was a windfall. After the essence concealing tree was moved into Paradise Planet by Chiochio, an extremely deep pit was revealed. A burst of glaring light dazzled Arbor's eyes. Mo Lian's figure flashed, arriving beside Arbor. The young couple looked into the tree pit at the same time, their gazes fixed on the pieces of crystals scattered in the pit. There were all kinds of crystals used for refining tools, forging stones, and so on. There were all kinds of colors and all kinds of materials. In addition, there were also many mystic beast and spirit beast cores, big and small. Every piece was thrown into the tree pit, circulating with a faint light. Arbor blinked and looked up. A small red copper cauldron appeared in front of them, spinning back and forth in midair without any warning, just like an excited child who had seen a lot of snacks, so happy that he was about to fall down. Arbor looked up and silently exchanged glances with Mo Lien. Prince Mo couldn't help but say, "It's rare to see the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron so energetic. Looks like it's the pile of food that has piqued its interest." "That's right." Arbor looked speechlessly at Mo Lien. With a wave of her small hand, she grabbed the small red copper cauldron without any explanation. At this time, the 2 stars on the cauldron's body had already lit up. The entire red copper cauldron was translucent and beautiful like colored glass. At this moment, it was spinning around Xiao Mu's palm like an impatient child, waiting for its little master to feed it. Arbor held the small red cauldron and simply jumped into the tree pit. He casually took out a red Xian beast crystal core and fed it. The cauldron fire within the 9 stars mirroring the moon cauldron spontaneously ignited without any wind. The faint cauldron fire instantly burned the Xian beast crystal core into liquid and absorbed it cleanly in an instant. Arbor fed the small cauldron several crystal cores and more than 10 different types of crystals and forging stones. The small cauldron absorbed it very quickly, and in less than a second, it would turn it into liquid and absorb it. Arbor couldn't help but sigh when he saw this. He muttered to himself, "This glutton, I wonder how much he needs to eat to raise the 3rd star." The little fellow simply squatted down, holding the small cauldron and feeding it for several minutes. Only when the flame within the small cauldron changed from a very pure red to a faint glass color did she stop, somewhat astonished. Lin quickly comments, Mo Lien simply jumped into the pit filled with all kinds of crystals and crystal cores. She came to Arbor's side and helplessly pulled him up. "What's wrong, my Jojo? Did you see? The color of the flame actually changed." Mo Lien nodded. "Didn't you say that when the 2nd star rises, this cauldron's refining speed will double?" Arbor vigorously nodded. "That's right." You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.